Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel.
And here we are. Just Rhonda and I. Here you are. That's right. Open mic number 117. Hope you're doing well today there, Rhonda.
I am doing pretty good.
Well, good.
Just enjoying my quiet Sunday. Well, it's not really quiet. All the grandkids are home, of course, and it's snowing outside, so,
You keep that shit. You keep that shit over there, or you send it to Susan. We've got a deal. We have a deal in place.
Well, yeah, but I don't know, man.
Maybe.
California is sending it all of my way in the form of snow. And that snow just tends to get worse the farther east it seems to go.
Yeah,
so
I know. Well, we've had a little bit here and there the last week or so, but we haven't had too much. Been pretty cold, but anyway. Well, I guess it's going to be you and I. We're going to be at least starting out. We got people got other things going on. I know Cherie had a prior engagement. I think Susan's got internet issues and so on and so forth. So it's going to be you and I doing this. I've got Steve Tinker and Monica Burkert-Brist. Neither one of these are like extremely long, so it's just going to be Rhonda and I doing this reading. It should be fine. It's not a huge deal. Obviously, it's always better when we have multiple people. But anyway, let's greet everyone there in the chat. I see we've got several that's popped in here. I see there's JD and the lovely Catnip, TTM neighbor TTM fangirl, and Gloria. Under your scarf. Who else we got? There's Andy B from across the pond. Gloria, and there's Colette. Nan's live. Thanks for coming. Who else we got here? There's Rhonda SD. I think another one from across the pond. West Virginia. Who else we got? There's Disco. Yeah, he's a rascal. You got to watch him. There's Disco.
He's giving me a new nickname. And Rondi, what is it? Rondi Poo. All right.
Who else? There's another super mod, the lovely Dark Side. There's Kay. Thanks for coming, Kay. Really appreciate that. And that's all I see so far. Yeah, he's a rascal. 8 Case 10 is too. 8 Case 10's
is Rowdy Rhonda. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, West Virginia.
There you go. Well, as
I have her muscles and her looks. She's a tough old lady.
Who's that?
Rhonda Rowdy. Rhonda Rowdy. Whatever. I can't remember now. I messed up her name. I don't know.
Oh, you're talking about the
fighter, the boxer.
The boxer? Oh yeah. She beat your ass just right away. Look at you. You're whipped.
I know.
So, I look back, because it's been a while since we've been through these. And, when we started back over, I tried to go back and see what I could see without having to listen to everything. And I'd written down these two names. So, in talking with, Big Jeff and others, we did go out of order, when we first started reading these depositions. We've had them for a long time. And we've read them, for specific things over the last couple of years, but we're trying to do them in a more orderly fashion. We did step out with Tom Fallon. We did go ahead and do his because this is where we were after we did Deb Strauss and Jennifer Nashhold. And everybody wanted to go ahead and do Tom Fallon. So his is done, but I'd written down Steve Tinker and Monica because they're right here in the May 12th, May 13th time frame. This is when the deposition started. So these two, we'll get these two done, and then we'll I think this is the last two. Let me check here. I think these are the last two until July. Hold on. And I can tell you, we have for May, yes, Amy Lehman, Deb Strauss, Monica Burkert-Brist, Steve Tinker, Fallon. Yeah. And then that's right. And then we move into July. And in July, coming up when we start over, there's Lynn Zygmunt and William Beck. So, all right. So this will get us current with May. So, with that said, let me get this pulled up here.
So while Jack's getting that ready, we decided, the two of us together made an executive decision that he's going to read all the witness parts and I will read all of the attorney parts. And before, if it's somebody other than Stephen Glenn or Kelly, I'll say, attorney blah blah blah, and then I'll read what they say because their parts are usually pretty just kind of down to objections and things like that. So I'll read all the attorney parts, Jack will read the witness, and I will need to be taking frequent sips of water because I have not really a sore throat, but a dry, scratchy throat. I have a dry, scratchy throat.
Your throat don't feel good?
Froggy throat, yeah. So I'll be taking several sips of water, and so I apologize ahead of time. But yeah, how it's kind of going to go.
That's fine. That's fine. So, all right. So as you can see, this is actually Tinker's was supposed to have been first when we started these over, but we didn't. I didn't do it. I did them out of order. So anyway, so this is and Tinker, and as you'll see, as one will see, he is the one that really assigned these various lawyers in the AG's office the various cases or whatever. But we'll read more into that as we go. So we'll look at the lawyers. I do want to make a notation here as well before I move on. For some reason, and you'll see this, and I'll show it to you right now. This is Steve Tinker's deposition, and you can see where it says there on the screen the date and the time. If you go over to Monica Burkert-Brist, it also says Steve Tinker and the exact date and time. However, if you look at the next page of Monica's, you can see her name is right there. So this is Monica. So this is their screw up. It's nothing that we did. It's just the way that the way that we got the files when we got them way back. Want to clear that up in case anybody caught that later. Nothing we did. So anyway, so let's look at the lawyers here. Let's see. We got a room full of lawyers. Of course, Glenn and Kelly, Covelli and Bascom, and Covelli's on behalf of Dennis Vogel in Manitowoc County, and Bascom, Manitowoc County. Holland is on behalf of Kosoric in Manitowoc County. They just got a pile of lawyers. And of course, Finkelmeyer's from the DOJ. He's on the behalf of Steve Tinker, these are pretty much the same lawyers that we see throughout the entire thing.
Yeah. And
then, of course, the examination. Covelli, at the end, his cross-exam, he starts on page 50, so he'll have some. This one's 64 pages, so he'll have a few pages for cross-exam.
Okay.
All right, let me get squared away.
We're starting on page 4, line 22, right?
Exhibits. Yep, that looks correct. Yep. So you can start whenever you feel froggy. And just so everyone knows, we'll break every few minutes, so we're not just reading a wall of text. we'll try to get through as much as we can. But if there's questions, again, try to put them in chat. Well, I'll try my best to glance at my iPad and try to keep up if there's questions or comments, whatever that we needed to discuss. So, all right.
In fact, I was going to try to, since it's just the two of us, I was thinking I would, I know that I can, get a split screen. Oh, there it is. So I'll try to do that and see if that'll help. That didn't work quite like I expected. Anyway, yeah, we'll try to just between the two of us, we'll try to keep the um oh, I'm like, what? I don't understand. I'm looking at your script on the YouTube, but I'm also got mine pulled up and I'm like, I don't understand this. But I got it now. I'm good. Good grief. What a joke. Um, so that, oh my goodness. No, 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 I don't want to close those tabs. Sorry, guys, I'm getting myself organized here. Okay. Okay, so here we go. This is going to be fabulous. Jack and I are getting good at the duo thing.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to start on page 4, line 22 with Mr. Kelly. All right, I'd like to make it a matter of record, before we question the witness, that I've taken the position that Mr. Finkelmeyer may not represent the witnesses here in any sense of appearing or making objections, that he is really, for purposes of this deposition, which is the deposition of a non-party witness, a spectator. He contends to the contrary, that he may make objections. We're going to go ahead and proceed. If it turns into a problem, we'll probably have to stop and try to reach the court. Mr. Finkelmeyer, I think Mr. Kelly restated our positions correctly, and I have no objection to proceeding. By Mr. Kelly. Question, would you state your name, please?
Steve Tinker, Tinker.
Mr. Tinker, what's your office address?
17 West Main in Madison, Wisconsin.
And do you have office phone number or numbers?
Yes, my office is blah, 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 blah.
And do you have a cell phone?
Yes.
And what's that number? What's your date of birth?
February 9, 1954.
And your occupation?
I'm an assistant attorney general. I'm a lawyer.
And within the Department of Justice, do you have any particular title?
I'm a unit director of criminal litigation, antitrust, consumer protection, and public integrity.
What are the duties of that position?
It's basically a supervisory position. It's an appointed position by the Attorney General. I currently supervise criminal litigation, which is a number of attorneys that handle special prosecutions, criminal prosecutions across the state. We also handle sexually violent person commitments. There's an antitrust component where there are 2 attorneys and a paralegal that review and prosecute antitrust cases throughout the state and in multi-state actions. Then I have a group of attorneys that handle public integrity work, basically complaints against public officials, either for open records, public meetings, ethics violations, or misconduct in public office. And then there's another component of the unit, consumer protection, that also has a supervisor assigned to that. They mainly handle consumer protection complaints, both from the Department of Trade, AG, and Consumer Protection, and multi-state groups.
How long has the Public Integrity Group been in existence?
Since I think September of 2003, it was, and it would have been shortly before the report in the Avery thing was issued.
All right. And was that group instituted through the decision of the Attorney General?
Yes.
How many lawyers are in that group?
Currently, there are two and a half.
At the time of the Avery investigation, how many lawyers were in that group?
There were two.
And who were they?
Jennifer Nashhold and Monica Burkert-Brist.
How long have you held the position that you just described to us?
Approximately 7 or 8 years. I replaced Steve Everett when Everett became a judge. So I think it's about 8 years.
All right. And how long have you been in the Department of Justice?
Since 1988.
Would you briefly tell me what the different positions are that you've held in the Department of Justice since 1988?
I came to the department into criminal litigation unit to do criminal prosecutions. I was there 2 or 3 years, and then I transferred to the environmental protection unit to do criminal prosecutions and other assorted things. I was there about 3 or 4 years, and then I became the unit director of the government operations unit and was there, I don't recall, 3, 4 years. And then from there, I became the unit director of the criminal litigation.
All right. Was the Avery investigation and report the first such project of the Public Integrity Unit?
The first major project, yes. There would have been, before that, there would have been responding to citizen complaints
All right.
and that.
Did the Department of Justice receive a formal request for assistance from the Manitowoc County District Attorney's Office in relationship to the Avery investigation?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 1. Ask you to take a look at that by Mr. Pollan. When you identify documents, if you could give the Bates number, I would appreciate that. That would help us all follow along.
This
Mr. Kelly, sure.
this is Bates number 5002.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
is that the formal request for assistance that was received by the department from the Manitowoc County DA?
Yes.
And I noticed there's a received stamp on dated September 19th of 2003. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you recall whether or not there was a meeting at the Department of Justice on September 19th, 2003, between the Attorney General and the District Attorney of Manitowoc County about instituting the investigation?
I don't know if we had a meeting on that day or not, and
Okay. Do you remember whether there was such a meeting on some date?
I don't recall a meeting. I remember a series of phone calls with the DA, but I don't remember an actual meeting.
Do you recall any meeting with Assistant District Attorney Michael Griesbach and people in the Department of Justice at the outset of this investigation?
I believe at some point in time, he and the DA brought down their DA file.
Okay.
That followed, we had already had some phone conferences about it.
All right. Do you remember whether or not exhibit number 1, Bates 5002, was hand delivered or did it come through the mail?
I don't know.
Do you believe that the decision to proceed with the investigation by the DOJ was made even prior to the receipt of exhibit number 1?
I believe it was.
All right. And do you recall how much prior to the 19th that decision was made?
No, I don't.
Okay. Let me just ask you, have you reviewed any documents in preparation for your testimony today?
I reviewed the final report that was issued, and that would have been about a week ago. And then the review, I don't know if it was for the purposes of this deposition. I'd ordered our documents back from the record center and had compiled my emails, had gone through those in anticipation of your document request.
All right.
So those are what I have reviewed.
Okay. So you reviewed your own emails. And did you review the documents when you got them from the document center?
Yes.
Okay. So you've reviewed the complete file in the case.
I've looked at what this kind of classes of documents are. I didn't read each document, but I went through them to see if there were any issues on any of them.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 2 in the case. It's a 2-page document, pages dates 5000 and 5001, and ask if you'd tell me what that document is.
This is a response letter from me to the DA, basically following up on his initial letter, which was Exhibit 1, where we accept responsibility for the case and set forth what our standard agreement is on expenses.
Which is that you would be reimbursed by Manitowoc County for the cost of the investigation.
Right, for our out-of-pocket expense.
Okay, now what was the authority for conducting the Avery investigation?
Well, what we had used in this case was the provision of 978058B, which authorizes district attorneys to request the assistance of either one of other DA's offices or our office to assist them in their duties. So we were relying on that provision rather than a formal special prosecution appointment.
Is 978058B about special prosecutions?
No, it's about the duties of the district attorney.
Okay, I'd like to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 3 in this case. Ask you to take a moment and examine that. And that's Bates 5088, Counsel. Is this an email from Peg Lushlever, the Attorney General, on September 18th to various personnel in the department about how the Avery matter is going to be handled?
Yes.
I'd like to direct your attention to paragraph 2 of that document, and I'm going to read a portion of it to you. Quote, "Several issues are floating around out there," end quote. This is the Attorney General speaking to personnel in the department. Quote, "First and foremost are concerns we discovered today regarding potential problems with the investigation prosecution," end quote. What were those concerns that were discovered on September 18th, 2003 by Mr. Pollan? Object to the form foundation of this witness to testify about what Peg Lovebrush meant by that. You may answer.
It is interesting. I'll get to the answer in a second that they wrote in quote in that paragraph
I
up
know.
there.
I looked at that and I was like, what? Okay, fine. It did surprise me.
I'm going to read this answer, then I got a quick comment, then we'll move on. I don't really recall, to tell you the truth. It may be in reference to the last sentence talking about criminal appeals folks being walled off, but I don't have specific recollection of what it was about. I did want to make a comment because they talked about above here expenses, the out-of-pocket expenses, and that Manitowoc will be paying for it. I'd like to know how much that was. Just making a I'm sure I've read that before and never really and had made a mental note and then just completely forgot about it. But I'd like to know if we could find that out. I'm just curious. So this is into that. Yeah.
I do think there's some relevance. I mean,
Yeah.
that it is relevant for sure.
Yeah.
Is somebody with us?
Hi, y'all. Can you hear me?
Hey, Christina. I've got notifications turned off, so I didn't hear you sneak in. Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are y'all?
Great.
So, this task force, Public Integrity Unit, the first case they ever handled was the Stephen Avery case. Did I hear that correctly?
I think first major case.
Well,
yeah, you're kind of muffled, but I heard your question. I think it's the first major case. I think they handled like some other more piddly type cases, or maybe cases that were really not in the public eye.
I find that interesting. I feel like they threw together a team. I'm changing microphones right now, but I feel like they threw together a team to fix this mess, right? And figured out a way to get paid for it out of taxpayers' dollars. And that's what Glenn and Kelly are establishing right now.
Well, I mean, there was already a something in place that handles certain things, but this public integrity unit, you could be right. I don't know without getting a bit more information, because it seems to have been formed just a few months prior to the PEGL decision and letter and all that bullshit. So
probably around the time they got the DNA results back that Allen and not Avery was the perpetrator of the Bernstein case, and they knew they were in Six Creek.
I mean, the way it read there, if I'm remembering it right, it said a few months. So I don't know. Maybe there may have been a suspicion already. I mean, it's hard to say because they're so they lie so much. We could go off a couple of different directions on that, but you could be right. I don't trust any of them. Okay. While we're paused here, let's look and see if there's anything in the chat. Is that better? That is better. Much better.
All right. Good. Okay. I'm muting now.
Yeah. I got to turn you down because I turned you way up.
Hey, how yours is going? Good. Good to see you here. Sorry, I was reading from the chat.
Oh, no. Absolutely. I see. We do have, I see R. William, and there's BW Haggis. Who else we got here that's joined? I thought I saw another name here.
Behind the magic.
Behind the magic. Yep. There you go. There's Tuco. Hey. There's, yep. Yep. We've had a few more join us, so I appreciate it.
Doing good.
Okay. Let me get back over here to the document and we can continue on. I just wanted to make a little note. I'll probably go back at some point here and highlight that so I can, so we can try to find out if they'll tell us. They may not come off of that and tell us how much they paid. And I always say this because in connection later to the $2.5 million that they spent on the Hallmark investigation and all that shit. So anyway.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, hey, Becca Chu just popped in, and so did Paul Ward. So hello to you guys.
Hey, thanks for coming back in, Paul. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And Becca Chu is just lurking and listening while doing artsy stuff. That's good. Good for you. That's awesome.
It is.
Okay, should we get back started?
Absolutely.
Little Barb just popped in. Hi, little Barb.
Hey, little Barb. Thanks for coming. Yeah, okay, line 20. So, yeah, line 23.
Okay, line 23. Do you have any recollection? Well, let me strike that. And let me ask you, prior to the time of the issuance of this email, had you personally had any discussions with either the district attorney of Manitowoc County or assistant district attorney Reeseback in connection with the Avery matter?
Yes.
How many conversations had you had?
I believe I would have had 2-3 conversations prior to the receipt of the September 18th letter.
All right. And with whom did you have those conversations?
It would have been myself on one and D.A. Rohr and Mike Griesbach on the other end.
All right.
They usually were on a speakerphone.
Okay. Was the first of those conversations instituted by them or by you?
By them.
Tell me what you remember about that conversation.
They had, Mark Rohr had called me and said that they had just received I think the very first call was that they had received the DNA results and had a question about how that should be handled on the criminal side. What impact should that have on the existing judgment of conviction? And we discussed what the possible options were in terms of on the criminal case. So that the initial conversation was not so much on our review. It was how to deal with the DNA result on the criminal side.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
So
So he's saying that as soon as they got the DNA results, they called the AG's office to find out if they needed to release him, right? That's basically what that is saying. Not like is this enough? Can we still keep him in prison, or do we have to let him out now?
I don't know if I'd read that much into it, but certainly I think they had a conversation as to how they should handle it.
I think that's all they do is they convict him, and then they have like a toll-free line. What do we need to do on appeal to keep what keeps him in prison and what lets them out? Like they probably have like a tip line, like like how to make sure my person I convicted doesn't get released no matter what. And that's not just that's like winning. That's playing for the win, not playing for the truth.
I think they knew they were screwed and they had to let him out at that point, or this point in time, because he had already served his 6 years for Sandra Morris incident plus 12 more that he shouldn't have served at all. But to me, it's a deeper issue as to what the cops did. That's where these next steps come in, truly, because they didn't do shit. They didn't do anything, so they left it. Peg Al whitewashes the whole thing, and that's what prompted Avery to file a lawsuit, which put another huge target on his head. I just don't see anything that they could have possibly have done, at least at that point in time. Of course, they did it later, but I don't know of anything that they could have done to kept him in there. I mean, not that they didn't have the conversation they very well might have.
Yeah, I mean, I believe they had conversations. I'm sure they were digging in every little
Nook and
corner
cranny.
of every little thing, just to try to, see is there
Sure.
some other way we can keep him in.
That's very possible.
But I mean, like Jack said, there's just no way that, I mean, they were backed into a corner at that point with that, with the pubic hair.
Oh yeah, 12 years later, I mean, they were screwed. They didn't have anything else. So,
Yeah.
hey, I see we've got Cher's joined us. Hey, thanks for coming, Cher.
Under Your Scars, I think, has popped into.
Oh, well, they've been here.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay. All right, continue on.
Line 7, I believe, right?
No, line 3.
Okay. So that would have been, well, strike that. Let me ask you, that occurred prior to the entry of the judgment vacating the convictions?
It would have, yes.
All right. And the second and third conversations, let's go to the second conversation. When did that occur?
I believe it occurred after the judgment vacating was entered, because then their concern was having someone review whether or not there was any wrongdoing.
Line 15?
I didn't hear you say all right. I'm sorry.
Oh, I did. Yeah. All right.
By prior county officials.
Okay. With respect to the first conversation, what advice, if any, did you give them?
That if, based on DNA results, they believe that Stephen Avery had not committed the crime, then they should be moving in some form to reopen the judgment and have it dismissed.
And that is, in fact, what occurred.
I think so.
All right. And in the second conversation, did either Mr. Rohrer or Mr. Greasyback raise any issues with you that have been presented to them after the judgment was vacated about the conduct of the prosecution?
I think what they were raising with me was a concern they had based on the review of their old file.
Only
Right.
their review of their own file.
Right. I don't recall them talking about what other people had told them yet.
All right. In the third conversation, what was the subject matter of that conversation?
It was, I think, that one was after we had said that we would be willing to do the review, and they called me to try to coordinate how to get the materials to us.
So that would be sometime after the 18th of September?
I think it might have still been before we received the formal letter.
Okay. All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 4 in this case, which counsel is 5189 Bates.
Okay.
And you'll note that this particular email is dated September 11th by Mr. Covelli. Counsel, you're going to have to give us a moment since you're not providing us with copies of the exhibits to fetch these if you would. Sure. Thank you. What is this exhibit?
This is an email from Greg Weber, who is the unit director, head of our criminal appeals, to me, with a copy to his secretary, which says, quote unquote, David Becker, who is an assistant AG in criminal appeals. Quote, handled both the direct appeal and the denial of post-conviction relief. We are recalling the files from the record center as soon as possible, end quote.
So you called upon the retrieval of these records as early as September 11th.
Yes.
And for what purpose did you do that?
I'm assuming I don't have a direct recollection, but I would assume it was because I would have had the contact from Mark Rohr, and so I was asking to pull out whatever information we may have already had.
All right, I'd like to direct your attention back to exhibit number 3, Bates 5088, and in particular to the email entry at the bottom of the page from Daniel Bach to Peg Loschenblubler on the 18th at about 11:21 in the morning.
Okay.
Do you have any recollection about the Attorney General having said prior to that time and date that the office could not investigate the Avery matter?
No.
Okay. Do you know whether or not any public statement was issued on either Saturday, the 13th of September or Sunday, the 14th, about the Attorney General not having the authority to investigate the Avery matter?
No, I don't remember that.
Okay. Do you recall any discussions on or about the 18th concerning this particular document and Dan Bach's thoughts about having to explain a prior statement about lacking authority?
No. The first I would have learned of this, the bottom email would have been when I was CC'd on the top on the emails on the 18th at 1:47.
And did you yourself have any discussion with either Peg Loeffler or Dan Bach about turning around an earlier statement concerning the authority of the department to conduct the investigation?
I just don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember during the period of time between your first conversation with the DA and the assistant DA and this date, that is to say September 18th, any public demand being made by the Innocence Project or attorneys for Stephen Avery that there should be an investigation conducted?
I have a vague recollection that there was a public demand by Keith Finley, and I may have actually even had a phone call from Keith, but I can't remember the substance or the timing of it.
Do you recall whether or not that demand was discussed in your phone conversations between you and the DA and ADA of Manitowoc County?
The DA may have raised that with me, but I think that means have an exact recollection of it.
All right. I show you what's been marked as Exhibit 4. Counsel, it's Bates 5613 through 5615. Ask you to just take a moment and examine that. I'm going to direct your attention.
Okay.
First of all, would you tell us what this document is?
This is a report from the Wisconsin Department of Justice, Division of Criminal Investigation. It's up on the top. It calls an initiating case report. It basically is the cover sheet that explains how it was that the DCI got involved in the first place. It's a summary.
Okay. At the top of this document, under the heading for the Division of Criminal Investigation, there's a statement that says, quote, ACISS initiating case report, end quote. What's ACISS mean?
That's an acronym that I have no idea what it stands for. It's an acronym. It's their new database system that put their reports into, and other agents. And if we're authorized, we can have access to the reports through that. But it's an acronym for the computer program, and I have no idea what it means.
When you say there, you're referring to the Division of Criminal Investigation.
Correct.
And what is its position within the Department of Justice, just for
It is
lay audience?
It is a separate division. There are 4 or 5 divisions within the Department of Justice. Attorneys are within the Division of Legal Services. Our law enforcement are within the Division of Criminal Investigation. We have a Division of Law Enforcement Services, which has the crime labs, the Criminal Records Bureau, and Training and Standards. We have a Division of Administrative Services. And then we have a division or an Office of Crime Victim Services.
All right, I'd ask you to turn to page 5614, the second page of exhibit number 5, and well down the page, there's a paragraph that begins, quote, soon after the mistake became public knowledge, end quote. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Would you take a moment and read that paragraph to yourself?
Yes, okay.
Do you recall discussions with Mark Rohrer or ADA Michael Greasyback about the people who were approaching Rohrer and or Greasyback, telling them that they believed all along that Gregory Allen committed the crime and not Stephen Avery?
Yes, he did raise that with me.
Okay, who did he say was telling him that?
It would have been current employees in his office that had been in the DA's office at the time of the Avery charge.
All right. Did he mention any other individuals? For example, did he mention any personnel in the sheriff's office who had been there at the time in question?
I don't remember that offhand. There might be, but if he raised it, we followed up on it. But I don't remember offhand that being raised.
Do you remember any of the names that he told you of people in his office who were making the statement that Gregory Allen had committed the crime and not Stephen Avery, and they knew it at the time?
I don't remember the specifics.
Mr. Covelli, I'm going to object to the form of the question by Mr. Kelly. You can go ahead.
I don't remember their specific names. One was at the time when Mark Rohrer was talking to me, she was a paralegal, but had been a legal secretary. I believe her name might be in our final report.
All right.
But I don't remember the specific names.
Did you make any notes of your conversation with or your conversations, the 3 conversations that you told us about between yourself and DA Rohrer and ADA Attorney Greasyback?
No.
At any time, did you disclose to the investigators who were conducting the Avery investigation in the Department of Justice the names that have been provided to you by Rohrer or Greasyback as having made statements to Rohrer or Greasyback about what actually happened?
I don't believe that I provided the actual names. I think I provided the general information.
All right.
But basically, they would have got the names from the DA.
To your knowledge, was any investigatory interview conducted of Rohrer or Greasyback as to what they had been told and by whom?
I don't know that.
Okay. Would you consider that to be important given what Rohrer and Greasyback told you they were hearing from people in the office?
Probably.
Okay, I'm going to show you two exhibits contemporaneously, exhibits 6 and 7. which council are the two formatted versions of the investigatory report. One begins 5012 bait stamp and the other one begins 5027 bait stamp by Mr. Bascom. Six is 12 and 7 is 27.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. By Mr. Tinker or by Mr. Kelly. Mr. Tinker, I would ask you, are these the same final product of the investigation that was conducted by the DOJ and the assistance that was provided to the DA of Manitowoc County, albeit formatted differently?
Exhibit 7, which is the formal memo, is the final memo. And I've never seen the website before this morning.
And when you say, quote unquote, the website, are you referring to Exhibit 6?
That's correct.
All right. And
I didn't see an Exhibit 6 before this morning.
what do you mean by the website?
Well, it appears to have been copied off of our Department of Justice website under the news release section.
Okay. So is this the final report?
Exhibit 7 is.
All right. And as part of your duties, did you completely review this report before it was issued?
Yes,
Did you sign off on it?
I believe I would have.
Do you remember when Rohrer and Griesbach brought the box of materials to the DOJ, whether you met with them?
I'm not sure. I don't recall whether I was in on that meeting or not.
Do you know anyone else who was?
Well, our standard procedure would have been to have the DCI agents there. When they came, we would have already assigned it to Jennifer Nashville and Monica. So I assume Jennifer or Monica would have met with them. But I just can't right now remember who it was that met with them.
Do you have any memory? Well, you probably don't, but let me just make sure. Do you have any memory of any discussion of the identity of the people in the district attorney's office who had been making statements to Rohrer and Griesbach about what actually happened at the time of the Avery prosecution? By Mr. Clavelli. Objection to the form of the question.
They did convey it to our investigators in some form. I just can't remember if it was through me or Jennifer or just directly to the investigators because their names show up in the final report.
Okay. By Mr. Finkelmeyer. Karen, we just go off the record for a second?
Let's pause here. This is a good place to pause and just briefly discuss or whatever. I just want everybody to keep in mind the goal, as we go through. For those that have followed along, I'm sure they remember the goal. If you pay attention to what Glenn and Kelly are doing, pretty much throughout the entirety of these depositions, their goal is to find out from the people they're deposing who knew about Gregory Allen and when did they know it. What was the information? What was the had they told people? Who had they told? Who all knew that they felt strongly that this was Gregory Allen that had committed this assault on Penny Bernstein? So that was their focus.
And I think also to establish when, right? What period of time did the DA's office, from how long had the DA's office been aware that there was likely an innocent man in prison? And I think the purpose of that was because if you could prove they had left him in for, let's say, 96 to 2003, then that increases the, intentional malice, culpability, liability, personal suffering, right?
I think so.
And if they could have established that they knew from 85, from the time they convicted him, and just left and intentionally convicted an innocent man, that makes that $36 million figure not look so extreme, I would love to have that box of documents. We've talked about that before.
I'd love to have all these exhibits. I would love it because I mean we could spend weeks on just going through, and because we have to keep in mind we don't have these exhibits, which is what they're working off of, but they did have them. Glenn and Kelly did. I think they were, we've talked about this. I think they were well aware of the fact of exactly what Kasork and Vogel had done in '85, and that was another thing that they really were trying to get across. Culminating to the point of actually deposing them at the end of or in November. And I feel very strongly that's why Kasork and Vogel knew that, and the state obviously knew that they could not allow them to give sworn testimony. No way. No way.
No. And that's why Stephen Avery was arrested the day before Kasork was due to be deposed.
Correct.
I believe that wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
And, I'm curious how many people think that. Well, I'll wait until the end. Let's wait until the end of this deposition and ask the question.
Oh, okay.
I have a poll question for you.
Cool. I wish there was a way. I don't think. I don't think you can do it during a live. At least, maybe on StreamYard you can do it, but I can't do it through Prism to be able to put a poll up. It would be. There's probably a way to do it, and I'm just not familiar enough with how it works to make that work.
You could be able to do it from YouTube, Jack. Or maybe that is just in the chat, down at the bottom of the chat. It lets the manager, the owner, create a poll, but I don't know if you can see that using Prism or not.
Well, I'm just looking at our YouTube page straight, and I'm trying to see if there's a way to create a poll. No, it's got a number of different things that I can do, but that's not one of them.
That's interesting. Okay.
At least looking at the three dots up at the top, but there's probably something there, and I'm just
go down, Jack. Go all the way down to the bottom of the chat box.
Yeah.
And like where it shows the $sign to become a member and all that stuff. Does it not give you a place where you could? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, but okay. Becca says you have to be the channel owner, but don't you have all of the credentials for that, Jack?
Yeah, I'm signed in. So to the account, because to do this, the way that we do our lives and stream, I have to be signed into it.
Yeah, because I know I just barely discovered it a few weeks ago. I was like, oh, I can create a poll in my chat. So.
Yep, I see it here. I got it. Yep, start a Q&A and start a poll.
There you go. Okay.
I'll submit the question in the open mic text. That way, if y'all want to refine it, before we put it on the.
Sure.
Give me.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. So just to add just a little before we start back, Christine is right. When these people knew of the shenanigans that were going on, that's key as well, because again, this stretches back to the '85 case, and that's another really important piece. And Glenn and Kelly had these reports from Bergner and these other officials from the Manitowoc City Police. They knew that Kasork had been informed about Greg Allen. So it's not like they didn't know. We also read, or I did. It's been recent, within the last couple of weeks. There was a document I showed. It was actually on Jeff Jones when we did the live after his premiere the other night. It's a document showing It's like a few days summary. I think it's like, I can't remember how many days, maybe a week summary of the Manitowoc City Police and these various officers surveilling Gregory Allen. Now, we talked about surveillance and this act. That it wasn't like that they were camped at his house 24/7. That's not what they did. But they instructed their officers, especially those that were had their road duties or whatever, like in his area, to drive by and to keep an eye out for his car. And if they saw his car somewhere that it really shouldn't to be sure to check the backyard for him. So they were keeping a pretty close eye on him. I thought that was a really interesting report because it's fairly detailed. It's a summary, but it's got these various officers, they're reporting of when they saw or when they went by and kind of what they did. So when we say surveil, when we talk about surveilling Gregory Allen, it wasn't, again, it's not like that they set up camp out across the road from him. They didn't do that, but they did keep an eye on him pretty close.
Yeah.
Now,
Hey, look at that.
Interesting is we have, I don't know if we've discussed them publicly, but we have documents from Green Bay where they had trackers on Gregory Allen's vehicle in 95.
Oh, yeah, we talked about it.
Yeah, and he actually found it. Allen found it and ditched it. That's how terrible they were at surveilling him. Or how good he was at finding out about it, which makes you wonder, did he have a snitch?
I think he knew he was being watched because he knew what kind of person he was. He knows he's a complete monster. And I think as time went on, he took countermeasure steps to protect himself. I believe that wholeheartedly. And, like we've discussed before, Christina, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a closet full of, and I hate to say this this is speculation on my part, but I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't kill a bunch of people and we just don't know about it.
Oh, yeah. Like Jinxie, Jinxie's the one that's done a lot of research. I think she was 14 or 15 years old, the young woman in that he suspected of, Donna Emil.
In North Carolina? Yeah, absolutely.
I do not think for 1 second that she was his last victim. She may have been his first, because I think he was born in 54, and I think she went missing in 74, so he would have been in 20-ish. But I think that she was his first victim. He probably got scared off because he almost got caught, but it's obvious that he has a compulsion and he has no control. So
yeah, I agree, and I think he probably hurt some people prior to becoming an adult during his juvenile years. And we can't see that, of course, but.
Well, I know he did time in juvie time. He did juvie time in North Dakota and in Minnesota, and in California. He's done juvie time in 3 states, and then also done time in North Carolina, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, and I believe Illinois as an adult that I know of. And we know how he's worked all over the United States. So I would love to have records from all of that. The issue is, no one's going to volunteer Gregory Allen's crimes to us. And if we are not specific, like we have to know about the crime in order to get them to go look for it. They're not going to go dig through paper records, and they just don't have those records. They're hoping they stay dead and buried, right? They're not going to go volunteer to go look for them, unfortunately. We were very great. We got very blessed that the Minnesota case, those documents came to us the way they did. If that fell into the right hands, right? That request fell into the right hands to get that information. If it had been any other officer, in my opinion, that had received that request, they probably would have just said, we can't find it, or or I wouldn't have gotten as complete a file as I got on that. They
Right.
would have given bare minimum. So very thankful for that.
Yeah, Kay's got a question here. She says, "Do you know when the Public Integrity Unit was formed and for what the original purpose?" I think that it was formed. I don't know exactly what year, because the way Tinker's talking, they kind of had a hodgepodge formation of it some years prior, but it wasn't really called that. I think it was like original, like their actual name was like in May or June of 2003, just a couple of months before Avery was released.
May or June.
Yeah, a few months before he was released in September.
Oh, gosh, I don't know why I was thinking it was released in March. I don't know what I was thinking. Never mind.
No, they released to coincide with the anniversary of September 11th, so it wasn't a big deal in the news.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
That's intentional. In my opinion, it's intentional.
Oh,
I don't
sure.
of it, but I think we've all learned that the media is that government officials know very well how to time things so that they're not newsworthy or they are, right?
Well, it's distraction, you know. It's distraction with one story or another. Yeah. But yeah, I think it was just a few months prior to Avery's actual release in September of 2003. Kay, I can't. It could have been under, you know, public pressure. I don't know the original intent of why they formed it. I can't answer that. I just don't know.
They had a couple of DAs besides Manitowoc County DAs that were doing bad business, right? They had, I always want to say his name is Butkus, but that's not it. It's Biskupic, I think. You had Biskupic, and then you had the other DA that ended up going to prison. I can't remember, Paulus, I believe. So you have Biskupic, you have Paulus, and then you have like who knows who else. Those are the ones that have made the news. So you have all these cases where people are being wrongfully convicted, they're getting released, and so I think that the Innocence Project probably, you know, was ramping up they needed to formulate a task. This is what I think the Public Integrity Unit was for. They needed to formulate a task force to discourage the media and others from digging too deep into their dirt, right? So, hey, we're going to start a unit to dig our own dirt. And look how that went for them, right? They used it to you back in prison. That's all that unit has done.
There's also, I don't have it handy. I'm sure I've got a link somewhere. There's also the OLR and their work in, because remember, if you're in Wisconsin, other states have something similar. But you know, if a lawyer in Wisconsin gets in trouble, oftentimes their case is handled by the OLR and not the regular police. And it's a different set of rules. It's a different set of, and some of these people, I'm telling you, some of these lawyers, they committed multiple felonies. I'm not talking about like murder, but they were still felonies, serious crimes, and they got away with it. Well, I mean, they may have lost their bar card for 6 months or a year and had to pay a fine for, you know, whatever, but they didn't go to jail. You know, they didn't go to prison. So I think that
and ethics violations and all kinds of things that we know that they got away with. So
absolutely. So I don't know if that was. I don't know if that was dovetailed into that, you know, kind of as well, because again, this is public. You got public defenders. Some of these public defenders were committing freaking felonies.
Okay, are we ready to get back on the record?
Yeah.
Did you
absolutely?
Did you want to put her poll up, Jack?
No, she wanted to wait till the end here when we put it up.
Oh, okay. I thought she. Okay, I misunderstood.
after we read, who's after this deposition?
We're going to do Monica Burkert-Brist. Yep.
Also
Yeah.
from the AG, that she is, right? Let's
Yeah.
do them, and then we'll put the poll up. We can put
Okay.
it up like through hers, because I want people to have a refresh of what these people are stating on the record about what they knew when they knew it, kind of thing. Just to see if I'm like the biggest conspiracy theorist here, kind of thing.
Oh, you are, Christina? You're the biggest in the whole country.
No, come on. You're not like that.
She knows I'm teasing her.
She knows I am too. So, all right. Yeah. Yeah. We're back on the record. So you start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Mr. Tinker, after the directive that was issued on the 18th by the Attorney General, would you describe in general terms how the investigation and its supervision was set up?
The Monica Burkert-Brist and Jennifer Nashhold were assigned because they were part of the public integrity. I also asked Tom Fowler, who is an experienced prosecutor, to work on the review. The Attorney General also had a couple of DCI special agents assigned to do any follow-up investigations that would be. And so the game plan was to have the attorneys that were assigned to review the file that we had received from the DA and to review the criminal appeals file from Mr. Avery's post-conviction work. But we also had, at that time, set up a wall between our assistants that were looking at it and David Becker, who had been handling their criminal appeals, just in case there might be a potential conflict there, because historically, we had been arguing that there was no problem with any of these with the conviction. So we erected a Chinese wall. Our assistants could look at the pleadings that had been filed, that see our file would also have transcripts from the trial court. So that was an important part for us. So they were there to review the DA's file. They were to review our criminal appeals file and then decide what, if any, additional investigation should be done. So they would have them helped to direct the follow-up investigation. And then the follow-up investigation would take place by the DCI agents, and there would be contact with the victim, Penny Berenstain, and then come to the conclusions. And then there would be internal discussions of what they believed. And then once some agreement was reached on that, then the report would be compiled.
Ordinarily, the chain of reporting authority for the DCI special agents goes up the line within the within the DCI. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in this circumstance, I will just say, and you tell me if I'm right, the record appears to show that the two special agents, Deborah Strauss and Amy Lehman, were in regular contact with the three attorneys who were assigned by you to this investigation.
That's correct.
And was that an exception to the rule, or is that an ordinary working process between attorneys who are assigned to a particular matter and investigators who are working on it?
That's the usual practice once agents are assigned. We follow the chain of command to get the agents assigned. Their supervisors decide what agents are going to work on it. But once the agents are assigned, it's pretty much direct contact between the agents and the attorneys. And the agent supervisor and me as the attorney supervisor don't get too involved at that point.
Okay, I'm going to ask you this question, and you tell me if it's correct then. I understand that there were two DCI investigators on the investigation, Deb Strauss and Amy Lehman, working with three attorneys, Tom Fallon, Jennifer Nashhold, and Monica Burkert-Brist, all five of whom were being supervised by you.
Yes.
And that you then reported to Mike Bauer, who reported to Dan Bach, who reported to Peg Loschenblagler.
That's correct. The agents also technically will be reporting up their chain, but it did go the way you described it.
All right. And their reporting up their chain is just to keep their bosses informed about what they're doing.
That's correct. And any of their reports have to be approved by their supervisor before they became official reports.
All right. And to your knowledge, did that occur in this investigation?
Yes,
There was also a reporting relationship, was there not, between the legislative liaison for the Department of Justice and the front office about what was going on in the legislature with the Avery Task Force at the same time that this investigation was being conducted?
yes,
And in addition to that, there was one further office, the Public Relations Office or the Press Office of the DOJ, that was handling press relations contemporaneously with the investigation and with the proceedings in the legislature.
yes, that's correct.
Who was that person in the,
The press person?
yes,
I can't remember. It would have been either been, I don't know what the timing was. Let's see. It would have been Brian. I'm not sure. It might have been Brian Roselman. I can't remember
okay.
when the press guy was at that point in time. Who the press guy was at that point in time.
The initial review that you've told us about of the DA's file and the criminal appeals file was conducted by the attorneys who made the decisions about which witnesses were going to be interviewed.
That would have been done by the attorney at the attorney level by attorneys Nashville, Burkert-Brist, and Fallon.
And they would then have communication with the DCI investigators and tell them you should talk to A or B or C.
Yes,
And in turn, was there feedback that would come back to the attorneys from the DCI investigators saying, well, we talked to so and so talked to the attorneys. Oh, I lost. I was reading your script and I got, okay, well, let me start at line 12. Well, we talked to so and so talked about yet another person. And then the lawyers would say, well, go interview that other person or not.
I don't have personal knowledge of that, but I assume that's happened. That happened.
Okay, during this process, which took place between September 18th and December 17th of 2003, were there periodic meetings of the entire team to discuss the progress of the investigation?
The usual practice would be for that to have occurred. I don't remember specifically meetings, but ordinarily that's what happened.
All right. Were there external investigations, people who were witnesses or advocates calling in and speaking to either somebody in the supervisory chain or the investigators and providing them information to your knowledge?
Yes,
Do you remember any one or more of those interventions?
there was at one point in time we were interested in getting the defense file. So some of this exterior intervention either was initiated by us or by others. So I had, for example, I contacted Judge Burkert to explain that he might be contacted by the DCI for an interview, and if he had any of his file left, we would want. At some point in time, I contacted Keith Finley because we had learned that parts of the trial defense file were with the Innocence Project and said we would need that, although I think most of that follow-up is done by Tom Palin. Of course, I was contacted by Janine Gaske, who had been an advocate for the victim, for Penny, and she, every now and then, would ask me whether we had follow-up on a particular type of lead, and then I would take that and pass that on to the team. I was contacted by Penny herself, more asking questions about the process than the file. I was then contacted by Mr. Vogel just to ask what I think my name had appeared in a newspaper article or something, and he was just asking about the process and not about the facts. Bullshit. He was seeing where you were in your investigation. My opinion.
Um, First, let me just say, tell Andy I'm fine. It's just a dry throat and I'm fine. It comes and goes, but probably the more I talk, which is just who I am, probably the worse it gets. But I'm okay. And I have water right here next to me, so I'm all right. Line 5. How many times were you contacted by Vogel?
I think I only had one conversation with him.
In what stage, if you recall, was the investigatory process at the time that Vogel contacted you?
It was after we had agreed to take it, but before he had been contacted.
It was after and was the contact by telephone?
Yes.
Do you remember whether he asked you anything about Gregory Allen?
No, we didn't get into the facts at all.
Okay. Tell me everything you remember of that conversation, if you would.
He called me, identified himself. He said that he had been the DA at the time and had been reading in the newspaper that we might be doing an investigation. And I had been told shortly before that we'd probably be contacting him. So I said, it's my understanding you'll be contacted by a DCI agent in the near future. And he said, fine. And because I knew they were going to contact him and I didn't want to become a, we just left it at that.
All right. Do you know whether Mr. Vogel made any other interventions into the process with anybody in the Department of Justice?
I'm not aware of any.
Do you know whether he spoke, for example, with either Mike Bauer or Dan Bach or Peg Lagerlöscher?
No, I'm not aware of that. I don't know.
Okay. And other external interventions that you're aware of? Let me start over. Okay. Any other external interventions that you're aware of than those that you've told us?
No. Putting aside the Avery Commission, but in terms of the Avery investigation, I think that's all that I can recall right now.
Did you have any contact with Representative Mark Gundrum respecting the Avery matter?
Yeah, he had contacted me about the commission. Yeah.
At what point in time, if you can recall, relative to the process that you have described to us?
It was while we were still investigating and they were still forming the commission.
All right. And what was the content of the conversation between you and Representative Gundrum?
It was mainly he was soliciting membership for his. He wanted someone from the Department of Justice to be on the commission or the.
Ultimately, you resolved not to do that, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I believe that's where it ended up.
Okay, I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 8. Council, it is page 5090 of the Bates materials. I ask you to take a moment and look at that.
Okay.
What is this?
It would be an update email from Amy Lehman, special agent with the DCI, to Monica, Tom, and Jennifer. And then there are CCs are to me, to Robbie Lowry, who are the special agent supervisor, and to Deb Strauss, who is the other agent. And it's basically an update on what they had done that week.
This is dated Thursday, September 25th. So this would be nearing the end of the first week of the investigation. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And was this format fairly familiar? Are there other instances where there's emailing back and forth about the progress of what the progress of the investigation is?
Yeah, it's pretty standard format.
Okay. Do you know whether within the group of the three lawyers, Mr. Fallon, Ms. Nashhold, and Ms. Burkert-Brist, there was any allocation of respective responsibilities that they decided upon or that you decided upon for them?
I think eventually, as it worked its way out, Jennifer Nashel took the lead in writing the report. And in terms of directing the actual investigation, I think those were usually mutual decisions between Jennifer and Tom would consult. Monica would be in. Monica had more of a civil background, and Jennifer Nashel had come from a criminal appeals background. So a lot of the directions would have been in consultation between Jennifer and Tom.
Burkert-Brist's civil background of, did it have any purpose in the investigation as you understood it?
She was involved because she was a member of the Public Integrity Unit. So she brought that perspective to.
Okay, you're appearing here today as the custodian of records in this case, is that right?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 9. It's the subpoena. Counsel, page 5496, bait stamp. Question, and in your capacity as custodian of records, did you assure that the records produced were in conformance with the request that was made by the subpoena?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have everything as far as you know?
Yes. As far as I know, I asked DCI for their records, and Robbie Lowry and had Amy Lehman pull all of their records and gave me a copy, and those were included in my box. And then also included in my box was the box we received back from the record center from our investigation.
Yes, we need those boxes.
Yes, we do.
Boxes.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Jeez. And are you satisfied that you'll also have everything that's called for by the subpoena from Mike Bauer, Dan Bach, and Peg Lauchenluckler?
Yes, I assume so. I didn't talk to them directly about their response, but I believe that internally we made sure that we had all the documents that were responsible.
Okay. By Mr. Kelly. I'd like to go off the record for just a moment. Off the record. Back on the record. By Mr. Kelly. Mr. Tinker, do you know whether or not there is, as a result of the investigatory process, email that was exchanged between and amongst the three attorneys and or the investigators that was never put into a hard copy format?
I'm not aware of any. Basically, what I asked the attorneys to do, well, Jennifer is no longer part of the unit, but I asked Monica and Tom Fallon to make hard copies of whatever emails they still had. So I'm not aware of any, at least on the attorney side, that are floating there, and that there are on a server but have not been printed.
Do you know what the process was amongst the attorneys when the report was prepared? Were drafts going back and forth by electronic communication?
Yes.
And do you know whether or not all of those materials have been retrieved and given to us in hard copy format?
I believe they have. I was included in those loops. And I printed off, I believe one draft. I believe I had one draft that was provided. And I believe that there was also a draft from between Jennifer Nashel and Tom Fallon that's been printed and produced.
Do you know whether or not any search was made of the department's servers to determine whether or not there are further unretrieved e-correspondence about the case?
I'm not aware of that being done. It's hard for us to do that because of there is some security encryption that's done. So you can't do ordinarily you can't just you can't do just a blanket search. You have to have the individual or recipients do searches.
Okay, earlier you testified about the systematized format for the DCI reports when we were exchanging questions and answers about exhibit number 5. My question is this: from what, if you know, are those reports prepared?
You mean at the agent level?
I do.
Ordinarily, the agent's DCI's practice is the individual agents take notes, and then they take those notes and they sit down and generate their written report. Then they compare their report with their notes, and if the written report is correct, they destroy their notes.
How convenient. Immediately, contemporaneously with the preparation of the report?
Yeah, once they've confirmed that the report itself accurately reflects their notes, they're then destroyed. I'm not sure whether the destruction is done right then or after their supervisor has approved their report.
All right. And who was the supervisor who approved their reports in this instant? Was it the supervising lawyers or was it somebody in DCI?
DCI, Robbie Lowry.
Okay. And the notes that you talked about, are those, to your knowledge, are those handwritten notes or are they electronic notes taken on a laptop?
I'm not sure how these agents do it.
Okay. Do you know whether or not there were any tape recordings made?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you know whether or not the agents maintained memo booklets or small notebooks of their own where they made notes?
No, I don't know that.
Okay. By Mr. Kelly. Do we have the boxes quarried? Mr. Finkelmeyer. It's my understanding that they're outside right now, yes. By Mr. Kelly. Okay, let's take a moment and get those. I'm going to go through that with, I'm going to go through with that and then I'm done. Off the record, back on the record. Mr. Tinker, I'm going to show you a box of some materials and we're up to exhibit number 9. So I'm going to take a moment here and I'm going to put a sticker on this first box.
Reporter, I think that'll be box 10.
Okay. All right, we're going to make this exhibit 10. And then I would ask you, is this box denominated as the D? Is that the right way to say that?
Yeah, denominated.
Okay, as the DCI file?
Yes, it is.
All right. Then I'm going to take the materials out of it and I'm going to put a sticker on these materials, which would be exhibit number 11. I'm going to give this to you and ask you to tell us what that is.
It's basically a pile of paper and then folders containing documents. The top part of the loose files that says quote unquote volume 1 on a blue piece of paper is a copy of the DCI file that was given to me at my request.
In response to the subpoena.
That's correct, in response to the subpoena. So these are the records that the DCI copied and provided me.
All right.
And then there are a series of folders that have been bait stamped. The original paper documents that have not been bait stamped for this litigation, but that has bait stamps that are independent of our litigation. And then there are DCI reports in various folders that have been provided by the DCI. In fact, it appears volume 2 is in there. So all of these are records that the DCI provided for us.
All right. And I guess what I propose is a stipulation. Oh, were you finished?
Yes.
Okay, a stipulation involving all of the counsel in this case, the civil case, and Mr. Finkelmeyer on behalf of the DOJ, that we're going to call Exhibit 11 materials, the DCI file. Mr. Finkelmeyer, that's fine. Mr. Kelly, that okay, counsel? Mr. Bascom, it's acceptable. Mr. Covelli, sure.
Talk about a
Okay,
room full of
now
freaking lawyers, right?
a room full of blowhards.
Uh,
Okay, now I'm going to mark this second group of documents as Exhibit 12, and I'll hand these to you and ask if you would identify that group of materials for us, please. By Mr. Cavelli. Just for the record, did Exhibit 12 come out of Exhibit 10? By Mr. Kelly, it did not. Mr. Cavelli, did not. Okay.
Exhibit 12 is a series of folders, and it appears as though most of these have been bait stamped. The first folder is identified as, quote, Monica Burkert-Brist file, end quote, and those documents are bait stamped. The second folder is identified as Tinker's file, and in looking through this is I had gone through and searched my email directories for all my Avery investigations and files, and that's what is there, and that's what is here. In addition, the version of the final report that I have in my file. The next folder is denominated balance file, and it appears to be the emails that he produced or had still saved, and various DCI reports that he had kept in his own personal Avery file. The next.
Oh, can we go off the record? Sure. Off the record, back on the record.
Line 15. The last bigger file is denominated, quote, Dan Box Avery file, end quote, and it has a series of folders in it that, from the copies of the emails, they were emails printed off from Dan Box email folder, and it's denominated, quote unquote, Stephen Avery report. And then there's a folder which contains his notes from the Avery Task Force and a legislative council report on the draft of an eyewitness identification procedure. He has a folder on the eyewitness ID materials and a folder that's denominated, quote unquote, DOJ proposals, Stephen Avery, and it has a number of documents, but I'm not sure what those.
All right. Mr. Finkelmeyer, is there a particular characterization that you use for those materials? By Mr. Finkelmeyer. I call them the individual Avery files. All right, then that's what we'll call them. And that's exhibit number 12. Mr. Finkelmeyer, go off the record. Mr. Kelly, sure. Back on the record. Mr. Tinker, I've marked this next box with exhibit 13, and I'm going to ask you, in your capacity as records custodian, what is it?
This is a box of what contains our Department of Legal Services file on our Avery investigation. It has a green stamp on it, which is the record center box number identifying number. Its contents are when we were closed with our investigation was. All of the various documents were put into one box, and that's what this box is.
And did you, in your capacity as the custodian, go through these documents when the box came back to you from the record center?
Yes, I did.
Would you agree with me that there's a considerable duplication of several of the subfiles within the box?
There are.
All right. You made some comments earlier in your testimony about obtaining documents from the Innocence Project and from the Public Defender's Office. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Is it your belief that those documents are in that box?
I believe they are.
Do you have a belief about whether or not you obtained the entire public defender file? By Mr. Cavelli. Objection, no foundation.
I don't have any way of knowing if we got the entire file.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
To your knowledge, did you get any file from Attorney Burkert?
I believe that I'm not sure if we got the actual file. I believe that he had passed his file on to somebody else.
All right.
I don't know.
Were you,
And actually on the defense file, if I can back up, I'm not sure we actually got a physical copy or if Tom Fallon just went down and reviewed the file.
uh, went down where?
Oh, down to the Innocence Project.
So it's your belief that the public defender's file, such as it may have been, was given to the Innocence Project?
Correct. And
Where,
my belief for that is there was an issue for us on whether or not discovery was complied with. And there are the person that did it, I can't remember his name. There's a report involving him that is stamped and as having been received by the public defender. So Tom Fallon came across that report somewhere.
okay, to your knowledge, did anybody from the public defender's office tell you that they were withholding any documents from you?
I'm not aware of any withholding.
To your knowledge, did anybody from the Innocence Project tell you that they were withholding any documents from you? By Mr. Covelli. I'm going to object. There's no foundation. By Mr. Kelly. I'm just asking him what he knows. Mr. Covelli. Well, but there's no foundation that he ever spoke to anybody there for them to tell him these things. And well, I object to the form of the question. By Mr. Kelly. Okay.
I never had those conversations with anyone.
All right. I believe you told us earlier that you had a conversation with Judge Bolgert at the time that the investigators were going to be talking with him.
Correct.
Did you have any conversation with Judge Bolgert about whether he had any file that he had maintained from the case?
I have a vague recollection that we discussed that he was going to be contacted by the DCI and that they would want to get a copy, get a copier, get his file. That doesn't make any sense. And I have a vague recollection that he thought I think he told me he had passed his file on.
To whom?
Well, to next counsel, whoever it was involved in the past post convictions.
Which would be the state public defender's office, as far as you know?
Correct.
Did Judge Bolgert say anything to you about being unwilling to produce any aspect of the file for you?
No, that wasn't raised. We didn't discuss that.
Did you yourself have any conversation with Risa Evans about her file in the case?
No.
Did you yourself have any conversation with any members of the Avery family about any file they might have in the case?
No, I didn't.
Would it be fair to say that anything that the Department of Justice received and maintained from any person or organization that represented Stephen Avery would be in Exhibit 13?
Yes.
You are aware that earlier this week on Monday, Mr. Glenn and I examined all the materials produced by the DOJ in response to the subpoena, correct?
I received an email to that effect. Yeah.
All right. And you know that materials were bait stamped and provided to us following that inspection.
Yes.
Now, after we inspected the materials, to your knowledge, did anybody else involved in this litigation inspect the materials?
I got emails saying someone had, but I don't remember who it was.
Okay. Do you know whether or not any copies were made for the materials for whoever else inspected them?
I don't know.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. By Mr. Pavelli. I have a question.
You want to break here for a minute and let you get a drink of water or two, and
Yeah,
we can kind of discuss it a little bit. I mean, we can well, if anybody's got any questions, I mean, certainly put them in the chat, live chat. But just reading through this last several pages, there was a few things that raised my eyebrow, but really overall, I think what Kelly was doing was trying to outline everything that this guy had got, Tinker, from everyone, because as we know, as we talked about in the beginning, he's the one that basically he's the supervisor for this, and over Monica and Jennifer, and even to some degree Amy and Deb, but basically inside the office there. So, and it's a little confusing, but basically, I mean, it was confusing because of the way he answered the question. But basically, what I got from it, he got a copy. He got their own copy from the DCI, and copies of material from Fallon and other sources. So basically, and those boxes they're talking about was supposed to be everything they had. And then, of course, we get into this, and we're going to get more into it later. And we read, if anybody was following along when we did the Fallon deposition, it's a little hinky about when he's talking about when he went to the Innocence Project, and he's kind of vague about it, and I don't know, it just came across as vague and not the full story. I don't know if anybody else remembers that, but I do because I read it a few times before. And then of course he's talking about Judge Burkert, which was a defense attorney, and Risa Evans asked I don't know. There was also a mention about were any of these conversations recorded. And, I don't know. I found that through at least the Avery Dassey cases that they recorded quite often. I'm in the process of trying to actually get a recording of an interview that Strauss was part of with Jody Stokowski. Now, it doesn't denote on the. We don't really know. We don't really know. Let me back this up. We found that from the different reports, a lot of reports that we've gotten in the past, what they've written in the report and what was actually said during, when they're interviewing someone, doesn't always line up. Remember the Roger Radua's interview? What they wrote in the report doesn't really line up with what's in the recording, because I was finally able to get a copy of that. So, but anyway, back to the point. I think they did make recordings that were not made a part of the official record. Obviously, I can't prove that. It's really difficult to get ledgers from these people. I know that. Go ahead.
I just want to add to that for what you're saying about recordings. There is a report by Deb Strauss stating that at such and such time, at such and such date, she destroyed all of her tapes and notes regarding her investigation into the prosecution of Stephen Avery in the 85 case. And I always found that an interesting notation to make. Why would you destroy the evidence that corroborates your work on the case, right?
Well, we've talked about this before, remember? It is a really curious thing and it's actually in this deposition.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's I don't know. I just feel like they got busted. Glenn and Kelly are in the process of exposing what all they've done, and they decided to change the narrative. I think it's hard to argue against that with what we're dealing with, right? I mean, especially, you know what? If it was Stephen Avery and only Stephen Avery, as the defendant in a homicide case, maybe I could believe an argument that he might be guilty. But when you add Brendan Dassey and what was done to him into this mix, it is obvious they framed him. It's so obvious. And
Well,
I hate to say that because that makes me sound like I'm biased or whatever, but you've been researching this case much longer than I, and I have to say you play unbiased much better than I do, because I know they're corrupt assholes and I know they framed them twice. So, but maybe that's just, I appreciate that y'all are able to stay neutral, because I get frustrated.
yeah, I mean,
Christina, do you think it's bias when we have proof of everything that either for or against? It's not like we're just forming an opinion. I mean, of course we all have opinions, have formed opinions, but we've read every document available,
I think
and we have proof
yeah,
of these things.
yeah, but
I don't,
you know how you have those filter troll individuals who say, you have to say that there is the possibility that Stephen and Brendan could be guilty, or you're just being biased. Do you remember when they used to use that line?
sure.
Yeah.
I do. I do.
And I'm like
yeah,
beyond that now. I'm so beyond that. Because I'm still arguing with the same assholes on Reddit, right? And if you're still going to try and use that line after all the evidence, not only me, but everyone else has brought to the table showing that they're framed, then aren't you the biased one? Because you won't
yes,
give an inch.
right. Yeah, yeah. I don't think it makes us biased. I think it makes them very close-minded and very
Absolutely.
stubborn and
Perfect word. I was
yeah,
actually thinking closed-minded when you said it.
Yeah, I think
yeah,
and it makes you wonder why someone would dedicate this much time to a case and not be willing to accept that those you defend wholeheartedly have screwed up this time, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
I think,
I'll also look at, Brendan is certainly is a key factor, but I also have to look at how they treated Jody, and she was in jail. It was terrible. It was
yeah,
absolutely awful. And I feel certain. I mean, I took a deep dive, as most of you know, several months ago, and put together this comprehensive list of recordings and reports of where they went after her. They talked to her almost as much as they talked to Brendan. But of course, she wasn't necessarily a central figure. She didn't testify. I mean, it wasn't like they didn't try to get her to and flip, and she wouldn't do it. No matter how many times they went after her, her family, her friends, and the various things that they tried to pull on her, she still wouldn't flip.
yeah. I
So,
run into this same, I shouldn't say every one of us who were involved with Daniel's case. And I don't know if Cherie's in the chat or not, but Kay is, and she can tell you that we deal with guilters with the most like constipated minds you can ever imagine. Like it's even when you show them proof of a thing, of something, of one thing that you have proof of, they're just like the guilters in Stephen's case. They find a way to explain it to where it's no longer in their mind proof of innocence, but they just find a way to twist it to make it still fit their constipated mind.
try to justify it.
Yeah,
I take this as a prime example in the same vein, and then we can continue on and get this one done. Talking about this disturbed earth unfiled warrant, where it talks about in number 11, this blunt and bloody instrument. And, when all that came up back last year, in talking to some of these guilters, they were calling it hearsay. They were calling it everything under the sun except for what it really is, to try to justify why Wiegert would write an affidavit, a sworn affidavit, and included that.
And the only people who would make that argument are ADAs or DAs or AAGs, right? Assistant district attorney people. Because when a cop is writing a filed or unfiled search warrant claiming that there was a blunt and bloodied object in the back of the victim's vehicle, and that's never brought to light in the trial, they're claiming she was shot in the head. There was no argument about her ever being struck with an instrument that was
hell no.
That evidence was never analyzed. Nothing, much less was this report ever shown to anyone until we acquired it. That tells you they're not after the truth. They don't want to know, and they don't want to know why the prosecution lied. And when you have people who are legally trained who don't give a shit about the truth, that's a problem to me. That's a serious problem.
Well, and they're willing to go that route. They've taken their responsibilities and said, "This is what I'm going to do with it," instead of the right thing, following the law, even the spirit of the law.
Again, I say, if it was just Stephen, they've sullied Stephen's reputation enough where I can understand some people wanting to claim, he got what he deserved, whatever. But when you add Brendan to the mix, all bets are off on it's okay that they lied this time, right? It's okay that they set up an innocent guy this time, because what was done to Brendan is just absolutely heartbreaking and really shows how the criminal justice system can be manipulated to ensnare and steal the lives of innocent children.
Yep, but he had to have Brendan. He knew it. So that's
Brendan was the co-defendant. He introduced all the evidence they needed to sell the horrific murder story. And
yep,
and
that's right.
They turned the media in the jury pool.
Absolutely.
Going back a little bit, Christina, to what you said about, he's a bad guy. He's done this and this, and he's been convicted of this and that. So even if he's innocent of this, he's still a bad guy. So it's okay to go ahead and convict, right? Charge and convict. That takes me back to Dirty Bob Macy from the late DA in Oklahoma, and in the book that I was reading, Death and Justice, I mean, that was his attitude. When he was shown proof that, and I can't remember which one of these guys was the guilty one and which one was the innocent, but there was a case between Ronnie Miller or Robbie Lott or something. There were two men that they convicted this one man, or they put this one man on trial for these murders of these old women. And there was proof that the other guy did it, and at some point he even came in and confessed to doing it. And the state's attitude was, well, the other guy, he's bad guy and he's guilty of doing these other things, so we're just going to go ahead and they, ended up for quite a long time, I think, 2 or 3 trials that he went through, and they would never admit that he was innocent, even though the other guy confessed to it.
Yeah.
And he had to protect his conviction, his you know, like it's exactly what we're just saying. It's more about protecting a conviction and saving face than it is about finding truth and justice.
Or he's a criminal, so he doesn't matter, right?
He doesn't matter. Yep.
Yeah, but when
Yeah.
in reality, you're a criminal by convicting an innocent man. You
Right.
just have the
I know.
title DA. So people don't know the crimes you've committed. And
Yeah.
I think where people I think people really need to stop and think about all the things we've done in our entire life. Not everything we've been exposed for, but everything we've done. We can pretend that we've lived perfect, angelic, law-abiding lives.
I can't. Well, I followed the law pretty well, but I can't say I've been angelic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
can't either.
And
I don't even try to pretend.
yeah, I'm not gonna pretend. And so all it takes is one cop who gets a hair up his butt for you for whatever reason. And everything you've ever done wrong, if this cop decided to follow you around and arrest you or ticket you, and just think how the domino effect works, right? And that's basically what we see here. I think about Richard Glossop, speaking of Oklahoma. I think about that poor guy. So some cop didn't like his attitude. And I think that what was his name? Justin Sneed, I think is his name, his co-defendant. And I almost feel like he intentionally wanted Justin Sneed to name him as a co-defendant because he didn't like the way Richard Glossop talked to him. He said he was a jerk. But
Yeah.
that doesn't make him guilty.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but behind the magic, asked a question, but did they really need Brendan, or did breaking Stephen's alibi take things too far, so they went with it? Well, to answer, this is my perspective, in my opinion, and I'll answer that question. Kratz knew that he needed to put Teresa inside that trailer or house somehow, some way. And up to that point, and I'm talking about mid-February 2006, they couldn't do it. The forensics they couldn't do it. So, however they were thinking about Brendan in whatever capacity. I mean, they'd already talked to him once in early November and basically left him alone. And then in, mid-late February 2006, they went after him after the lawsuit was settled and broke him. They tried everyone else under the sun, and they all pretty much gave him the finger and wouldn't flip. And so they get Brendan, and he just couldn't defend himself. But with how Brendan was treated and what he eventually parroted back to them was enough. Words and words alone. And that, that's a problem within our system, that they're not forced to corroborate at least some elements of someone's statement, especially when you're confessing to this brutal assault and dismemberment, burning someone's body. There should be some corroboration to that person, to that crime, and they didn't do it. They didn't care, because in our system, it's allowed. But they needed that connection. So therefore, from Brendan's coerced statements, they were able to get out of MFL. They allowed them another entry back into Stephen's trailer or Stephen's garage. Remember what Kratz said in that later press conference. We now have detailed information, blah, 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 where to look, blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. They needed a big break in order to get back into that garage to plant that bullet out of MFL, which had nucleated cells. And then later, this search, under the hood search of the RAV4, 160 days later, whatever Doc said yesterday, and found a robust sample of Stephen's DNA on that hood latch. Bullshit. But they had to have it. I don't know that a judge would have allowed them back into that property without something really big.
No, without Brendan they had no story. They had no crime. What they had was some of Stephen's blood in the most randomest spots that didn't flow. Like if you actually look at where the blood is and try and figure out how it got there, it makes absolutely no sense. And then when
Yeah.
you start how it's applied, it really makes no sense, right? So this is what they had. They had some of Stephen's blood in the front of the vehicle, the victim's blood in the back, okay? And that's it. That's it. Oh, and they had her items showing up in a burn barrel 3 days later after it had been walked by multiple times by officers. And we know it was searched. They cleverly kept that out of reports that got published. But we all know the first thing you do when you go to a person's house and you suspect them of doing something is you search their garbage, right? And in rural Wisconsin, the garbage is the trash pit and the burn barrel. They never
Yeah.
even took garbage out of Stephen's house. That's how much we know he got framed. Even at the very end of all this, they never collected the garbage bag from Stephen's kitchen. Now that, to me, says it all.
Didn't do a DNA swab. They didn't DNA swab the mattress. There was so much they didn't do that it really kind of makes you think, well, wait a minute. All this stuff is supposedly happened, and they didn't look. And there are other things. We have to consider so much that of what we know that the jury never heard. We know 100 times more than they were ever told.
But Brendan gave them a story.
Yeah.
Right? They gave them a story of a crime. And his story, after they took him to the pizza party, after they talked to him at the high school, after they introduced Cherie found that article written by the University of Wisconsin students that really breaks down his 2 confessions that are recorded that took place, I think, the 26th of February and March 2nd. But there was also the one in between those that took place at Fox Hills Resort that wasn't recorded. And it really shows just how little Brendan talked and how much Uyghur and Fassbender did. I think really
oh yeah, there was one interview they talked 3 times as much as he did. He had to have Brendan in order for them to get back into the property, in order for them to find more evidence, and then that again allowed another search of the car.
They had to have something.
Yeah.
They needed a codefendant or a snitch. They needed a snitch. And if you look at the Randall Matea case, if you look at a lot of wrongful convictions, which have to either have let me rephrase that. If you look at a lot of the wrongful convictions that have been exposed, you will find one of 2 things. You will find a co-defendant that's innocent. Look at Kathleen Zollner. What's that case? What's the kid's name from Missouri whose friend is still sitting in prison because
Ryan Ferguson.
Yeah. Yep. So Ryan Ferguson and his buddy were wrongfully convicted because the cops got into his friend's head, right?
Well, he went to the police station. He reported he had this dream and
tripping on acid. This is what happened. I don't know if y'all know this. So he was tripping on acid, and a friend said to him, "Yo, you look like that sketch." And I don't know if y'all ever done psychedelics, but when you're tripping and someone says something like that to you, like you look like you killed somebody or you look like the person that killed somebody, sometimes that stuff can stick in your head. And he was struggling with drugs. He was freaking out. And so he called thinking he was doing the right thing, not realizing what he was doing because he was out of his gourd, tripping on acid. And they took advantage of that and that case is ugly. There's a lot to that case. Like if you
there is
case at all, like there's something sketchy about how he was killed and
They
why he
found
was.
they found bloody fingerprints at the crime scene that, as far as I know, have never been identified.
It makes you wonder why. Makes you wonder why.
Well, I don't know. When I hear stuff like that, of course, it could mean that the person that left the fingerprints has never been convicted of anything, so their fingerprints aren't in the system. But it also, a lot of times, it makes me feel like they're protecting someone. I don't know if that's true. That's speculation on my part, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, all right. Ron, do you feel like continue on with Mr. Covelli's questions to think?
Yep, let's do it.
All right.
Okay. Cross-examination by Mr. Covelli. Exhibit 13, you indicated, contains, to the best of your knowledge, all documents physically received by your agency, correct?
Yes, with the qualification that being that we had received the DA's file, the DA requested that file back. So we made a copy of the DA's file and then we returned, I'll call it his original. We returned the original DA file back to him, but maintained a copy of what he had given to us.
Just so I'm clear, my understanding of your testimony, though, is that defense file materials may have been reviewed, but were never physically provided and therefore are not part of Exhibit 13. Is that true?
I'm not sure what parts of the defense files were copied.
Okay,
If they were, Tom Fallon knows that.
of course he does. All right, but if I understood, Tom Fallon may have, you don't have personal knowledge,
Right.
but may have seen files from the public defender's office that were never physically copied and therefore are not part of Exhibit 13.
That could be true.
Okay, I guess I'll save the rest of my questions for you for tomorrow. By Mr. Kelly. What?
He goes back and, I guess, asks more.
Oh, okay. By Mr. Kelly. Mr. Tinker, anything from the defense file that was copied, as far as you know, is in Exhibit 13.
Yes.
That's all I have.
Reporter, okay, there being nothing further than Mr. Covelli.
Oh, we should maybe, well, this way we'll put our stipulation on the record about how we're going to handle these exhibits. Would that be appropriate? By Mr. Kelly. Why don't you go right ahead, Mr. Covelli? By Mr. Covelli. The documents that were produced today pursuant to the subpoena and that have been marked, I think we have an agreement that those that have not already been bait stamped will be bait stamped by DOJ, and that DOJ will maintain possession of the originals of all those exhibits and will make available at counsel parties in this litigation's own expense copies that they may wish to make and arrange for, and that the Bates documents will stay in each of their respective exhibits. Is that agreeable? By Mr. Kelly. That is agreeable. And just for clarification, that includes exhibits 10, 11, 12, and 13. By Mr. Cavelli. That's my understanding. By Mr. Kelly. So stipulated.
Reporter, okay, there being nothing further, I guess this deposition is concluded at.
Actually, Jeff, this deposition is adjourned for the continuation of Mr. Tinker's deposition tomorrow.
Reporter, okay, very good. The deposition is adjourned at 10:25 off the record. And I will tell you, Tinker does not have a part 2. He did not come back.
Yeah. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, he didn't come back. So, all right, that's the end of that one. And as I said, we're going to this other file, and it says Tinker, but you'll see this is mine. Get rid of that.
It's all the same people.
It is all the same law.
Stephen and Jody are there. Okay.
And of course, now Finkelmeyer from the DOJ, he is now representing Monica Burkert-Brist. So Steve and Jody are here, by the way, too. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah. I think I might have just mentioned that. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So if there's no, look at the chat here right quick. I think we're good. Probably move forward. Yeah, it looks like there's just some little bit of conversation. I did see T1 earlier. I meant to say hello. He may already be gone, but I'm not sure. And Misty Jean, I don't know Misty, but hey, thanks for coming. And Crockett has joined us. Thanks for coming, Crockett. And Bethany has also joined us. So thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. All righty, let's get on with Monica's. Hers is it says 37 pages, but it's going to be roughly 30 pages, probably a little bit less. So this shouldn't take too long.
You want? I'll read Burkert-Brist, and you can read the attorneys if you want.
Sure, yeah, we can switch it up. Absolutely. Okay, I'll be Mr. Glenn. Okay, line 11. Miss Burkert-Brist, let me ask you to begin by spelling your full name, please.
Okay, it's Monica, Monica, middle initial A, Burkert-Brist, Burkert-Brist.
Are you employed?
Yes, I am.
By whom?
The Wisconsin Department of Justice.
In what capacity?
As an assistant attorney general.
How long have you been so employed?
10.5 years, since October of 1994.
Are you assigned to any particular unit at the moment?
Yes, I'm assigned to the Public Integrity Unit.
And were you assigned to that unit from its inception on?
Yes, from early to mid-September of 2003 to the present.
Okay, there you go. That answers the question right there. So
Yeah.
early mid-September 2003 is when it was formed. All right. Line 5. So, okay, how about before that? What units were you involved with?
I've been at all-purpose infielder at the Department of Justice over the years. When I came to the DOJ in 1994, I was hired to be a senior litigator in the Employment Litigation Unit. From there, I was a unit supervisor for a contracts and commercial litigation unit. From there, went into management for a period of 2 or 3 years, running our division of management services. Then worked for a time as executive assistant to Jim Doyle while he was Attorney General. Then went back to management services, did a very brief tour of duty in the civil litigation unit, and then came to public integrity.
And how about before the Attorney General's office? Were you employed?
Yes, as an attorney. I was employed at what's now DeWitt, Ross and Stevens. At the time, it was the DeWitt Porter law firm. I was an employment and general civil litigation attorney there, doing primarily civil defense and employment cases. Prior to being an attorney, I worked in state government in a variety of capacities from about, the early 1980s until I went to law school.
Okay. The general subject of this deposition is the Stephen Avery case. And in particular, we're going to be talking about some aspects of the preparation of the response from the Attorney General to the inquiry from the Manitowoc District Attorney, Mr. Rohrer. You know what I'm thinking about generally?
Yes.
Okay. In connection with this litigation, we have been provided by the Office of the Attorney General with a number of documents that I understood relate to you. And I want to first establish that. Okay.
That's fine.
Could you take a look at the set of documents and tell me what exhibit sticker is on it?
The exhibit sticker on the document says Exhibit 29, Burkert-Brist Deposition.
Okay, and have you had a chance to take a look at those?
Briefly, yes.
Okay, do you recognize the handwriting?
I recognize all the handwriting except the very top sheet
Okay.
as my own.
Okay, do you have any sense of whose handwriting the top sheet is? Do you recognize that?
No, I really don't.
I take it you can tell from the content of that sheet that it relates to the Stephen Avery, to the Avery matter, right?
Yes, it appears to be a list of people to be interviewed related to that matter.
Okay, but you're not in a position to be able to help us out with that on whose handwriting that is.
No, it doesn't look like mine, and I don't immediately recognize it.
Do you have any sense of how that sort of a document might be in your file relating to the Avery matter?
It's possible that if someone else made the list and copied it for me, I would have put it in my file.
Okay.
I can't be absolutely certain it was in my file.
Yeah.
And it's possible that it got mixed up in photocopying. But if it was in my file, the best I can tell you is it would probably be there because someone had given it to me as a list of people they were going to interview or something.
Do you know if you've seen this document before today?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a couple of things to see if we can if it triggers any recollection. You see a reference, third line up from the bottom, to Ron Kaminsky, special prosecutor.
Yes, I see that.
Does that name ring any bells to you in connection with the Avery matter?
That one does not.
Okay. And quote, Captain Tom Bergner, end quote, in the last line of the top section, quote, man, PD, has its own file on Allen, end quote. Do you see that?
I see that. That name is somewhat familiar to me. I seem to recall that Captain Bergner may have been interviewed by our agents.
Okay.
And that was a Manitowoc Police Department captain.
But again, that's not an interview you participated in or witnessed or supervised.
No, actually, I did not witness or participate in any interviews.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's just go from that.
All right.
Let's go to page 5170. See the Bates number down there?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. About the fifth line down, it says, quote, sheriff was close personal friend of victim's husband. He took over the investigation, end quote. Do you see that?
I do see that.
Is that your right?
That is my writing.
Do you know where that came from? That is the information that's reflected on those lines of 5170.
It appears to me that page 5170, the preceding page 5169, and then not absolutely certain whether all the rest of the pages, but they all appear to me to be notes from an initial meeting that we had when the Avery matter was first being assigned to our office, which looks like it was dated September 19th of 2003.
Okay, tell me a little bit about that, if you could, please. Do you remember how that meeting came to be?
What I recall is that, and this was during a time when our unit, the Public Integrity Unit, had just been formed and we were basically just getting organized. I believe I learned either from my immediate supervisor, Mr. Tinker, or someone else up the chain of command that our office was going to be asked to do an independent review of the Manitowoc Prosecutor's Office and Police and Sheriff's Department investigation into Mr. Avery's arrest and then subsequent conviction. There,
Let me interrupt you right there.
Yes, sure.
Did you have anything to do with the decision to accept the request of the Manitowoc DA's office?
No,
Did you have anything to do with the analysis or the state statute under which the district attorney asked the attorney general's office for assistance?
no.
Okay. So is it safe to say that by the time of this meeting, the decision had already been made that the attorney general's office would participate in this?
I think that's fair, yes.
And had you received any information in connection with your invitation to attend that meeting as to what the purpose of the meeting was?
Well, I recall I had an understanding of the circumstances, which were that due to DNA testing that was being conducted as part of the prison system testing, that they had caused a hit which caused Mr. Avery to be exonerated, basically, or excluded, I guess I would say. And then as a result of that, our office was being asked by the current Manitowoc County DA's to do a complete review of the circumstances surrounding Mr. Avery's arrest and then, like I said, subsequent conviction.
Okay.
Hey,
Yep. You got a question?
will you reread that paragraph that you just read, Rhonda? Please, can you go back up, Jax?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, line
perfect.
line 24.
Okay. Well, I recall I had an understanding of the circumstances which were that due to DNA testing that was being conducted as part of the prison system testing, that they had caused a hit which caused Mr. Avery to be exonerated, basically, or excluded, I guess I would say. And then as a result of that, our office was being asked by the current Manitowoc County District Attorney to do a complete review of the circumstances surrounding Mr. Avery's arrest and then, like I said, subsequent conviction.
Yeah, she's wrong. She's wrong about that. That's not what happened.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. So are you keying in on what I'm keying in on? Why is she saying it sounds like they're uploading prisoners' DNA into the database and that's what caused the hit? Is that
Well,
what you're getting out of that paragraph?
that's what I got out of it. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right,
Yeah.
but that's not the narrative they're going with for how he was exonerated, correct?
No,
No.
not at all. No.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Line 9. Okay.
Who I knew that from, like which individual in the department, I couldn't tell you anymore today.
Do you know how it is that you personally came in to be invited to attend this?
I was probably either verbally invited by Steve Tinker, my supervisor, or I might have gotten an email request to attend the meeting, but there was one large group meeting that I think was on this date, September 19th.
Okay. Can you tell me, to the best of your recollection, who attended that meeting?
Sure. The meeting I recall, okay, and I believe it was the first meeting we had. But the meeting I recall, the Manitowoc County DA was present. He may have had another representative from his office. Mr. Tinker was there, Jennifer Nashhold, my colleague in the unit, and I were both there. I don't know if Mr. Fallon was there or not. He got involved, but I don't know if he was involved in the first meeting. And I believe one or two agents of our division of criminal investigations were present.
You take a look at, let's see, do you have
The other exhibit?
Exhibit 30? Yeah.
Exhibit 30, yes.
Yeah. Does that list of names at the top portion of that email help refresh your recollection as to who else may have been present or not? I mean, if it doesn't, that's fine.
It doesn't help me with respect to who else may have been present because a lot of the other names on here are people who I'm certain weren't present.
Oh, okay, fine. Reporter, did you say were not?
Were not, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Glenn. Line 22. So who was chairing this meeting?
I believe there was a short time period when the Attorney General may have been at the meeting
Okay.
and like sort of welcomed everyone and kind of kicked off the meeting. After that, probably to the best of my memory, Mr. Tinker probably would have been the individual who would have been most likely to sort of direct the discussion. But what I recall is that most of the meeting was a briefing about by the district attorney, Mr. Rohrer, about the circumstances, the record, that kind of information to us.
Okay. So in terms of trying to determine the source of the information that's contained in some of these notes, where we have things such as what I started out reading,
Right.
quote, sheriff was close personal friend, end quote, etc. Is that information, to the best of your recollection, information that would have come from Mr. Rohr?
If this was the very first meeting of our group and these notes reflect that first meeting, that would be my best estimation. The only reason I'm qualifying my answer is I can't be absolutely certain because not every page of this is dated, whether all these notes are from the same meeting or whether
Sure.
they were subsequent meetings.
Sure. And let me ask, is there anything from the first 2 or 3 pages, let's say 5169 to, I don't know, to 5170? We'll just do it a chunk at a time. That causes you to say, this did not come from that initial meeting.
In the first 3 pages,
Sure.
I don't see anything in the first 2 pages.
Okay.
As we get into the third page, for example, I'm referring to page 5171 and later, some of the information in that leads me to believe this may have been information that I received after speaking to one of our agents after some of these people may have been interviewed.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a couple of specific questions, and then I'll come back to this general
Sure.
approach. Towards the bottom of 5170, the third written line, it says, quote, Mike spoke to Dennis Vogel, practices in Madison now, end quote.
Yes, I see that.
Do you know who Mike would be there?
I was just thinking that as you were asking me, it may be Mike Bauer, but it also, I don't even remember anymore. Is Mr. Rohr's first name Mike? So, I mean,
No,
I don't know. So I guess the answer to that is,
it's Mark,
I don't know.
Mr. Glenn, line 7. Yeah, I think it's Mark, actually.
Okay, then I really don't know.
Take a look at 5171 for a second also.
All right.
Around the middle of the page, there are a few ways to sort of read that line. It could be, quote, Mike met with K, end quote, and then jumping up again, quote, Kasork, former sheriff, end quote, etc.
I see that.
Do you know that Thomas Kasork is the name of the former sheriff in Manitowoc County?
I know that his last name is Kosarik.
Okay.
And it would not surprise me if I had gotten some first names wrong in my notes.
Okay.
I'm apologizing, but that might be the case.
Well, how would you interpret what's written there?
Knowing my note-taking style, which sometimes leaves a lot to be desired, I guess, this looks to me as though I was saying met with K, meaning Kosarik, and then above that I was writing what I thought was Mr. Kosarik's name.
I got it.
So my guess is that some note of someone who had met with Sheriff Kosarik and I was writing down their description or their reaction to that interview.
Again, do you know who it is that provided you the information that's described after the words, quote, former sheriff, end quote, And I'm thinking I'm reading, quote, no emotion, no concern shown, no recognition about Alan, asked for DOB on Alan, end quote. Do you know that?
Cannot say for certain. I do know that I received information similar to this from the agents who did the interview.
You had indicated a possibility that, or at least some vague recollection, that there may have been another person from the DA's Roar's office with him at that meeting.
Yes.
If I were to tell you that there is an assistant district attorney in that county named Mike Griesbach, would that refresh your recollection as to the possibility of who was present?
He may have also been present.
And do you know whether this could be a reference to that Mike meeting with the former sheriff? Mr. Pollen, object to the forum and foundation at this point. Go ahead, ma'am.
I don't know that. That might, however, explain the mic on the prior note that we were talking about a few minutes ago.
Mr. Glenn, okay.
You've refreshed my recollection as to that note anyway. Page 5170. It may well be that if this note is from the first meeting and Mr. Griesbach was there, that he's the one who had already spoken to Mr. Vogel.
Okay.
That would make sense to me that we were being briefed on what they had done up to that point. As to the next page, I don't know whether or not that's a reference to anything Mr. Griesbach did or a later report I had from an agent about their interview with Mr. Kosarek.
Okay. Well, then let me come back to this generally on page 5170. I've already asked you about the quote, sheriff was close personal friend, end quote reference.
Correct.
The one beneath that says, quote, the detective says sheriff relieved him, end quote. You see that?
Yes, I do see that.
Do you know what the source of that information was?
Well, again, assuming that this note is from the very first meeting, the only source of information we had at that point was the briefing information we were being given by the district attorney's office and their staff.
Okay.
So it would have been one of the individuals present.
You know that that there obviously was a time later on when some DCI agents got involved in this.
Oh, yes.
Do you have any way of knowing whether 5170 is a page of notes that relates to the information you got from them as opposed to information you got at a meeting? Or are you still of the view that this is likely to be the second page of notes taken on 9/19/2003 as reflected on page 5169?
To believe that the 5169 and 5170 are very likely to have been my notes from the first meeting. The problem is, as I get farther in the document, 5171 through the end, I'm not certain if this is all from that first meeting or it could be notes from later on. And frankly, until you just showed them to me today, I had not looked at them. I handed them to Mr. Finkelmeyer to produce them, but I haven't reviewed them since. So I haven't looked at these for over a year.
Did you see any of the drafts that were, well, I'll say circulated, that may be too broad a term, but that at least were sent to Mr. Fallon and I think to you, from Jennifer Nashhold. I'm just going to show you.
Okay,
And I don't mean to hand you something and then yank it back right away.
that's all right.
Exhibits 24, 25, and 26. Now, just take a quick look at those.
Well, without taking a long time to look at
Sure.
each one individually, what I can tell you is that I have a general memory that as Jennifer Nashhold started drafting this document, she did from time to time circulate email versions of various drafts to Tom Fallon and myself for review. I don't recall ever commenting or doing any editing other than reading more carefully than the earlier drafts, the final draft, which became the final report.
Okay, the reason I'm asking you this is that if you look toward the bottom of page 5171, which is part of the Exhibit 29, these handwritten notes we were looking at.
All right.
There's a reference to paralegals from the DA's office at the time under Vogel. First paralegal, Bev Badker, said she told Vogel it had to be Allen, not Avery.
Right.
Well, do you recall either from the interview reports prepared by the DCI agents from Ms. Nasshol's various draftings of the response to the Aurora request, information to that effect, that is, that there were, in fact, people who had been in the DA's office who had said that they had told Vogel that the perpetrator was Allen, not Avery?
I do recall that that was communication to both agents during the investigation, and I believe it appears in the final report that in fact there were staff members of the DA's office who expressed their belief that Mr. Allen might be the actual perpetrator. Yes.
And let me see if I can find this quickly. I don't want to take a lot of time.
That's all right.
My guess is that it's in the exhibit that's being photocopied right now. Mr. Glenn, can we go off the record for a moment? They're off the record, looks like for a minute. Yeah, for a minute. And they're, and then they're, back on the record.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Line 13. Ms. Burkert-Brist, let me show you again Exhibit 24. Invite your attention to page 5210 and ask you to at least read to yourself the third full paragraph on page 5210 and see if that refreshes your recollection. And now, have you read that?
I have read it.
Okay, let me just ask you, does that refresh your recollection with respect to what it is that Mark Rohr, the DA from Manitowoc County, told your office at the outset of this, let's just say this gathering that was held on September of 2003?
It doesn't refresh my recollection as to specifically how I learned the information that there were members of the DA's office who had these reservations both at the time the Avery conviction and afterwards. I do remember that we were aware near the very beginning of the investigation that there were members of the DA's office who, at the time, had expressed reservations about Mr. Avery's guilt or innocence.
Does that help you out at all in interpreting 5171 only on the question as to whether or not that was prepared at this first meeting in September as opposed to being prepared later?
What I'll tell you is that if I were going to give you my best estimate, and it's only an estimate,
Sure, I understand.
I suspect that all of these notes, all this entire exhibit, with the exception of the first page that I already discussed, are probably notes from the very first meeting.
Yeah, and
I say that in part because there's no date break showing that I was taking notes later on. But it is possible because I tend to have a habit sometimes of keeping a memo pad, and I'll just keep a running pad in a case file. It's possible that they built on one another. So I can't tell you for certainty whether these came from the first meeting or later.
okay, I was going to ask you about the absence of dating.
Right.
And is it your routine practice generally to date a document when you're starting notes?
I do try to do that, but if I'm in a hurry, if it was by a phone and I was hanging up the phone and running off to something, it's possible I wouldn't have.
Okay.
But I would agree that certainly is what tends to lead me to conclude as my best guess that these were all from the first meeting.
Let me continue then on 5171. After the reference to somebody meeting with Casora,
Correct.
former sheriff, there is a statement that says, quote, current sheriff And above that is written Peterson, end quote. Somebody said nobody except the old sheriff believed that Avery was really guilty. Again, if we're operating from the theory that these notes all came from that first meeting, is this information that is coming from the representative of Manitowoc DA's office?
Yes, it would have been because that was our only source of information at that point.
Okay. And on page 5173, there is a margin note that I'd like you first to read, and then let me ask you a couple questions about.
Okay. The margin note says, and I quote, the key issue is what sheriff and DA did when they had reason to believe Allen might be the perp. End quote.
Oh, okay. And my question is whether or not that is an issue that you identified as sort of weighted as the key issue, or is that something that you were told by someone else, if you remember?
I don't think it's really either. I think it was a consensus. I have a vague recollection that either after the initial meeting with Manitowoc County or shortly thereafter, within a day or so, we had an internal meeting where we discussed sort of our plan about how we were going to go about looking into the matter. And in the course of discussing that, identified this right away as sort of the key issue as to whether or not what the representatives did with the information once they had it.
And would it be, let me just come back to the last page, 5174, and I'll return again.
Right.
Would you think it's a fair interpretation of that page to believe that there are notes as to what kinds of documents people should be getting on their hands on? You see reference to the police file, the sheriff's file, materials, safe materials from the safe, City of Two Rivers police stuff, anything from other jurisdictions, Burkert. I mean, do you understand that to be one of the defense lawyers?
Yes, I do.
And Risa Evans, do you understand that to be another defense lawyer?
Yes,
Their files.
everything except the last line, I would agree. I think this page, 5174, looks to me as though it's a list of file materials we were determining to obtain and review. And the last, I think, is just an indication of legislators that had expressed an interest in the matter.
Right. Okay. So that out of the way, let me come back to 5173 again. I take it one of the things that's going on at this meeting is that people are talking about issues that matter and how those issues will be addressed, correct?
Right, how to go about gathering information, who who might have information and how to go about finding it. And again,
And again, I mean, is it fair to say that it was consensus of the group that the issue was that what happened once the DA and the sheriff had reason to believe that Allen might be the perpetrator?
well, I'm a little bit uncomfortable speaking for the entire group since we, in some ways, haven't completely concluded who all that this is, well, who all was in the group. But I think it would be fair to say that this is my interpretation for myself, from my own notes, of what I thought we had determined was certainly a key, if not the key issue in our review.
Okay.
Was it, for example, was it disclosed? Did the defense have access to the information? Information like that.
And do you know whether specific assignments were given out at that meeting? That is, person A is responsible for gathering documents, person B is responsible for legal research on exculpatory evidence or whatever.
I do recall an informal sort of assignment of tasks. I don't recall whether it was at that very first meeting, as I said, whether we concluded with the DA's office and then met together. They left They left and we continued to meet, or whether it was shortly thereafter. But there definitely was a division of labor created in terms of which of the attorneys were going to do what things, and the agents were the ones primarily responsible for the legwork and the field work related to the interviews and gathering documents.
Okay, tell me what your role was after that meeting.
My role initially was as a participant in the meeting, sort of coming up with a strategy on how to go about reviewing the matter. Shortly thereafter, I think it would be fair to say I sort of almost immediately became disengaged. It would be fair to say that it became clear that Jennifer probably should take a lead role in terms of reviewing matters and doing the drafting eventually when the report was ready to be drafted. And Tom Fallon moved in more to assist Jennifer because he had a much stronger criminal prosecutorial background than I did. I was new to criminal law. It didn't make a whole lot of sense for me to be evaluating a prosecutor's conduct when I had never had any experience with it.
What do you recall doing? What do you recall doing with respect to these issues? And I'm waving my hand
Right. In general, yeah.
over these documents.
Well, what I recall is basically being available for brainstorming and as a resource. So, from time to time, when Jennifer would be working on this matter, she might pop into my office and say, the agents reported XYZ. Do you think we ought to send them back for a second interview? We might talk about something like that. Once in a while, if the agents were stopping in to talk to Jennifer and Tom about what they found when they went out and did an interview, if I was around, I might step into the room and listen. So I had a general awareness of how things were proceeding, hallway contact with Tom and Jennifer, but that was pretty much it until the report was being drafted, and then I was included just in the email group on the report.
Do you recall doing any significant editing of the report?
No, in fact, I'm not sure they did any, to be frank.
Okay, do you recall generating any substantive emails with respect to the report?
No,
Now, how did you keep your records relating to the Avery case or the Avery group?
right. I had only a very small file where I stuck handwritten notes. I think initially everyone in the group, meaning Tom, Jennifer, and myself, got the investigators' reports as they produced them. But it became very clear right away that that was going to get incredibly bulky and not a very good use of resources. So very early on, I transferred that responsibility to Jennifer, and she started keeping all of the case reports and materials in her office.
Okay.
I never I did read a number of the agent's reports, but I never looked at any of the documents from the DA's office myself or did any of the file review of, for example, the appellate record or anything like that.
Did you ever give directions to the agents that you recall?
Not by myself. It may be that I was present with Jennifer or Tom when they would report on an interview and say, do you think we ought to do X, Y, or Z? And then they would have, I might have concurred in that, but no, I don't think I ever gave individual direction.
Mr. Glenn, okay, that's all I have. Mr. Bascom, do you have anything close? Mr. Cavelli, I do not. Mr. Bascom, I do not either. Mr. Glenn, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, reporter, they concluded at 4:02. So this was a later in the day. So we did do it correctly as far as the order of when they appeared. So good. Woo-hoo.
Mhm.
So basically, Monica's, her deposition was interesting, but basically it sounded to me like she took some notes during that first meeting and a few subsequent notes. And then she really wasn't too involved in it. That's what I gathered from this.
Yeah. Yeah, sound like it. And she sounds more honest than anybody else in a
So far,
deposition.
yeah, she didn't have a bunch of this. I don't recall. She tried to quantify
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, she was the best witness I've heard so far.
Absolutely. All right, let me turn this off here.
Probably wasn't trying to lie about a bunch of shit.
You're right. Exactly.
I find
Okay.
it interesting she's the only one with notes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, she didn't. She didn't have a barrel burning, did she?
No, she sure didn't. And I bet they quickly halted that practice after this case.
Mhm.
Okay, you want me to put your poll up? I've never done this before. I guess I can give it a shot.
Yeah, just copy and paste it.
Yep, that's what I'm trying to do right now.
I hope somebody made sure it was written well.
I looked at it. I mean, I
It
wasn't checking up on you, but it looked good to me.
All right.
well, it's a yes no. It's a yes no poll.
No, oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Well, you can still people can still answer it, I guess.
Yeah.
Add option here. Let me see what this. So this is an ABC poll. So you can just answer A, B. Yes is A, B is no is B, and the third one will be C, and you'll see.
All right, thanks. I didn't realize it was yes, no only, or I'd have rephrased it. My bad.
No, I don't think it is. I think there's other options. I thought maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, I'm going to try this. If it blows up, it's not my fault.
It's not gonna blow up.
Okay, it's not letting me. It's not giving me. It's got a thing there that says "Ask your community," and I click it, but it's not doing anything.
There's not one that says post a poll or something.
Yeah, create a poll, but
Create a poll.
yeah, that's what I did. Oh, it says your question is too long. Oh, you son of a.
Oh, okay. I forgot it has. Okay, let's see.
Yeah, I can probably shorten it.
Yeah, you can do it.
Try it this way.
Like do Wisconsin's AG office or something.
That's exactly. Yep, that's what I was going to do.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be bossy. I just
No,
suggested.
you're limited to 100 characters.
Okay.
Okay, now it's going to let me. Hold on, I'm almost there. Okay, you'll see it here. A is yes, B is no, and C will be the third option. There you go. Now it's up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, it's an interesting question. There was a lot going on during those years, and I find Tom Fallon's involvement again sketchy, shady, considering his continued involvement into the Avery case, into the Halbach case, his heavy involvement, not only then, at the time, in real time then, in 2005 and onward. But then later on, when KZ took the case, he's still involved, up to his neck.
Even to the point of participating in the prosecution of him, almost like a FU, not only to Stephen Avery, but also to Glenn and Kelly, right?
Well, kind of,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, he made sure it didn't get overturned because he sat in on the conviction. And when you have the AG's office participating in the prosecution, it's almost like they're saying, we're going to make sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed. And you're
And even
not
if it, and even if it's not, you're still not getting out.
yeah, exactly.
So this question of, thinking of the Wisconsin AG's office made aware that Stephen Avery was wrongfully convicted in 86, 95 or 96, or 2003. That's an interesting question. It's unfortunate we don't have really too much information from the AG's office from back in real time. And I'm speaking the 85, 86, 87 time frame. I wish we had more. I wish we could afford to get that entire case file, but we just don't have an extra $5,000 laying around. I've checked my piggy bank and I just don't have it. If I did, I'd get it.
If you'd like to contribute to us getting records, free Stephen Avery bumper stickers for sale for $5.
I mean, I'd like to have that entire case file, the 85 case file. And seriously,
Yeah.
the price is, I can't remember the exact price, but it was around $4,900 for all of it.
I still want the videos of these depositions. I'm not
Well,
gonna lie.
I would honestly, if we had a pecking order of what to get when, I'd rather have those first. I'm with you. Body language is everything.
Especially in this case, because it really, there's just so many times when they're answering these questions, it's like you can feel their uncomfortableness, right? And Andrew Colburn's attorneys want us to believe that making a murderer made us think this way about them. But if we had raw, unedited depo video to show that these guys were squirming like ants were in their pants the entire time they were on, being deposed, I think it would go a long way to destroying that avenue of, this is the only reason we think this case is screwed up.
Right now the poll is running
50-50.
Yeah, pretty much. So still more towards real time. That's an interesting question. But anyway, yeah.
Big Jeff, anyway.
What's that? I'm sorry, Christine.
Where's Big Jeff?
I don't know. I sent him a message, told him that this was what was next today, but something may have came up and he couldn't attend. I haven't heard from him, so
he's definitely got a lot going on for sure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So, and we're just past the holidays and all that, so hopefully he can join us for the next time. Which again, let's I don't think we have too much more to say about what we've read today with Tinker. We covered it pretty well, and Monica, I think we can see she had very little involvement. So coming up in July, there were 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 4 interviews or depositions between July 13th and 14th. Lynn Zygmunt, William Beck, that's the 13th. And then the 14th is Dave Hartman and Perry Kingsbury. So probably for the next time, unless something, in the Colburn case or whatever pops, We'll do July 13th next. There were several in August. Like, there were a bunch in August.
Yeah.
There were a few in September. And there were several in October as well. So,
Who's Dave Hartman? I don't recognize that name off the top of my
let me pull it up here. Let's see. That's an 85-page deposition, I can tell you.
Huh.
Yeah, that name doesn't sound familiar to me either.
Let's see. There tells a lot. All this. Okay. Wow, they got all these introductions here on this one. This is crazy. I don't remember seeing this on any of the other.
I don't think I've ever read this deposition.
He's showing him Exhibit 50. It's a subpoena. It's the cert custodian to the custodian of records of City of Two Rivers. And he is the custodian of records for the City of Two Rivers. That's who he is.
Interesting. So
It is.
that is very interesting. I look forward to this one.
I'm sure I've read it probably once long ago when we got them. I just don't remember it though. Anyway, yeah, we'll be covering, let's see. Trying to get a time. Actually, his is the second interview for that day, but his is on the 14th. So it'll be, I don't know if we'll get to it on the next open mic in these depositions, but if not the next one, it will definitely be the one after. And it looks like his is in the morning of the 14th, but we'll do them in order, whatever that is.
I'm so grateful you're doing these because it's kind of like refreshing our memory. And then I know we've said this a ton, but I feel like the more we go over this case, now that we have more data to process, the more we recognize like things that kind of flew over our heads, right? The first time we looked at
Well,
it, or the
I think we can just talk more intelligently about the entirety of it.
We just know more. The more we
Yeah.
learn, the more we know, the more some things like we connect dots and things like that, I think, and like things start to make a little more sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we just and it's so funny because the more you learn, the more you, for me anyway, the more I know that Stephen and Brendan are innocent, and
Absolutely.
everything that was done to them was, for the intention of derailing this civil suit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Something was going to happen, whether it was this or something else. They were going to rearrest him and re-jail him and derail those depositions. I'm sure of it.
Some way or other, yeah.
That's exactly right. So anyway, we've kept everybody about 3 hours now. That's I think, unless somebody else has something to add. Rhonda, what's your plan for the week? I'll get that in before we go.
I just I'm want to try to start working on the next accuser in line in Daniel's case, which would be Shardarian Hill. I want to try to start working on that. It's really, hers is such a
Pain in the ass.
yeah, it really is. It's a pain in the ass, very convoluted, and hers is just, I mean, her story was just so outrageously, outrageous, and of course, he was found not guilty on all of her charges, and rightfully so, because it was just so bizarre. But I want to try to start working on that, so I might try to get that started this week. I am also going to see how much is going on in the Idaho 4 case. I don't really, other than, other YouTubers and other people doing their own sleuthing and things like that, I don't expect any more news on the case just because it's being so closely held. And so um, hopefully it'll be a start on Sherdarian Hill.
Well, there is that video I posted in the Moscow room.
Yeah, I did see that.
I haven't watched it. That documentary. I know
I
a lot. I know a lot of people trashed her for doing it, but I don't know the
I
content. So
yeah, I started watching it and I found it. I'm not going to trash them for doing it, but it made me uncomfortable, and that's a personal problem, just that was just how it made me feel, and that doesn't mean that it shouldn't have been done or anything like that, but um, are you talking about the documentary with with
y-
Kaylee
y- y-
Gonzalez's family?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it made me uncomfortable, and so I don't know, but it was what little bit I did listen to it was interesting. Oh, yeah, Sherry, if you have if you can grab a link to that, I remember you saying something about that yesterday. If you can find a link to that, I'd like to watch that and see what that says.
Oh, oh,
Sherry had
the
mentioned yesterday.
on Dateline.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I've got Peacock, so
yeah, I do too. I don't, be honest, I just am not, I don't feel like trying to dig for anything right now. That's really bad, huh? I just,
no, and I
not that I
understand. Yeah,
feel sick or anything, I just feel like, ugh.
you got
What?
you got work week starting back tomorrow, so I completely understand.
No, I'm off. Tomorrow's a holiday, so I don't work
Oh, that's
till I
right.
don't go back to work till Tuesday.
That's right. That's right.
So
It's
yeah,
okay day?
MLK Day, yes.
MLK Day. Yes, that's right.
So I'm curious, what is, you heard about the college kid who went to Mexico and her friends killed her down there?
I
Yes.
I don't
saw something
that
last night about that.
Yes.
For some reason that case is bugging my husband, and I was curious if what y'all's thoughts of that were.
What
Like,
little bit I know about it, I think that girl beat her to damn death, and the mother kids covered it up because they allowed it to happen.
do you think, because my question is, this is my question, did they plan, like, was the intent from leaving US, was the intent on harming her formed in the United States and then carried out on Mexican soil?
That I don't know.
Because
I'm sorry, say that again.
so was this something that kind of just happened while they were in Mexico, or was this something that
Premeditated.
was premeditated? Like,
Oh,
they knew they were going to beat her up at minimum before they left America, because the FBI is looking at the case, and I feel like they're looking at the case to determine whether or not the crime was formulated on American grounds and they lured her to Mexico, or people who went with her to Mexico knew that at minimum a vicious assault was going to take place.
I,
And
I,
if so, that makes it kind of an interesting case, um from from the standpoint of it's an American crime, even though it took place on foreign soil, right? So I thought that could be an interesting angle to kind of look at it, like an interesting lens to view it through. So
um, yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting. The way I understood it, the reason the FBI was involved is because he's an American citizen, and was lured across the country lines or, out of the country or whatever. But at any rate, it was taken, the crime, even though she's an American citizen, it was committed across state lines or across country lines. So that makes it a federal case.
Federal case.
That's the way that's the way I understand why the FBI is involved. But I saw very little about it, so there could be a lot more to it that I'm not aware of.
Yeah. Supposedly there's videos floating of them like assaulting her, and it's pretty bad. I tried to find it. I couldn't find it. I haven't really done it. I got my plate's full. You know what I mean? So if I add anything else to it, I'm just going to get up from the table and walk away. But my husband, like I said, he was interested in it. So those are like the things that I was thinking of, knowing what he shared about it, that it would be interesting to see what kind of charges develop. Is it going to be luring across, like what would that be, across
Country line, out of the country.
country
Well,
line? Yeah,
it's a murder committed on foreign soil.
right.
Soil, yeah, there you go.
Lure her there for that purpose, right? And how does that affect the charges? Because see, if they lured her there with the intent of harming her, then even though the crime was committed on foreign soil, it's still a crime that originated in the U.S., which makes it, because see, it's all about jurisdiction, right? So it's got a lot of interesting little caveats to it, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I just haven't heard. I just don't know enough about it to talk intelligently about that end of it. Only from the end of it, that from what I saw, it just appeared that however the fight developed, or this beating, I should say, the other parties involved allowed it to happen, and then they covered it up. That's what I gathered from what I've read so far, and I could be totally wrong, but we'll see.
You guys want to address the poll?
Yeah, you go ahead and read it there.
Oh, it's Christina's poll.
No,
Yeah,
I can't see it though. What does it say? Read it.
Oh,
Ron.
okay. So 38% said 1985A or 1986A, sorry. 54% said 1995 or 96.
Okay.
And 8%, but one of those votes was a mistake, said 2003.
So they're saying in the 90s. Okay. Well, that's fair enough.
That makes sense because that's when the phone call originated, right? So, let me rephrase that. That's when the introduction of a supposed phone call saying Stephen may be innocent was inserted into the narrative by the state of Wisconsin, right? It was in 95, 96. So those are all facts that are confirmed and can't be disputed. So interesting. I actually thought it was going to be about 8% thinking from 85, 86. So that makes me feel better. That means we're doing our job because we're getting the information out there.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and Croc asking if there was a right or wrong answer to it, and I just said I think it's more of an opinion because
there is no wrong.
Yeah, we don't really know for sure. Like that's why I said we would really like to have that 85 case file.
Oh yeah, there is a letter that has always struck me as just truly kind of like rubbing Stephen's face in the fact that he was framed. Tom Kasurik wrote a letter to then Governor Tommy Thompson. I want to say in 88. I think it was the same year Gregory Allen got shipped off for beating up the security guard for peeping in the women's dressing room, saying that releasing Stephen Avery would do and I'm paraphrasing, would be such a danger to society because, and the way the letter is written, it's clear that he is being very specific and intentional with his words, right? Because the witness sat on the stand and pointed him out, and what she said was done to her. And knowing what we know now, it's like, you know, you're swallowing back the bile that's coming up, listening to his lies. We'll have to find that and post it, because that letter just shows just how committed Tom Kosurik was to making sure that Stephen Avery spent as much time in prison as an innocent man as he could get for him, right?
Sure. Sure. All right. So Rhonda's you're planning on trying to get back into the Daniels case on Thursday, maybe, if you have time. I'm taking it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do something on Thursday.
Right. Something's going to happen.
Hopefully something's going to happen on Thursday. I just don't know what yet. So it's going to be a surprise. You don't want to miss.
There you go. All righty. Well, we kept everybody here for right at 3.5 hours. So I'm going to get everybody out of here because I don't know about you, Rhonda, but I'm hungry. I haven't had dinner yet.
Yeah, you know me.
Yeah, I do.
This was awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yep, really appreciate everyone's participation. Thank you, Rhonda, for helping me read through these, and hopefully we'll have a few more participants next time, and we can pass the hat. Hopefully, Big Jeff can be with us for the next next reading that we have, and we'll move on and get through these depositions. So, I'd like to thank everybody in the live chat for hanging around with us on this Sunday night, evening, whatever, Monday for the Australians, and late night, early Monday morning for the Europeans that have made it this far. So with that said, hey, this has been a Foul Play production.